Chapter 31:28. The sun was setting in the west, and the afterglow was like blood. In the sky above the lake, the 10 Sir Gods were still desperately attacking the divine battleship. After close to 2 hours of fighting, the battle spread to a radius of a few thousand miles. In the sky above the region, the sea of clouds was empty. The lake below also had huge waves that were 1,000 feet high, and mist filled the sky. There were billions of living beings in the lake, but they were also affected. Countless fish and water creatures were killed by the aftershocks of the divine power. The 10 Sir Gods were covered in blood, and they looked miserable. Their divine power was almost depleted. There were many dents on the surface of the divine battleship. The divine light shield was also full of cracks, and its light was dim. Originally, the 10 Sir Gods could not hold on any longer. However, when they saw the divine battleship weakening and that it was difficult to break through, they gritted their teeth and held on, encouraging each other. Everyone, don't relax. The divine battleship is obviously weakening. The other party is just a paper tiger. Don't be afraid. It's time to make a contribution. As long as we can stall this divine battleship, we will have made a great contribution. Looking at the time, the sect master and the others will be here soon. Everyone, hold on a little longer. With their tenacious willpower and the belief that they wanted to make a contribution, the 10 Sir Gods continued to hold on. In the divine battleship that seemed to be weak and in a sorry state, Ji Tianxing sat in the control room and controlled the divine battleship to do all kinds of things. Zhen Hong stood to the side with a calm expression. He secretly used his divine perception to observe the situation on the battlefield. Lin Shui had her hands on her hips and stared angrily at Ji Tianxing. She looked furious. As for Sir God Blood Illusion, he stood to the side, quietly with an expression that said, "Just pretend that I don't exist." When the divine battleship was being attacked, the three of them were awakened. When they came to the control room, they saw Ji Tianxing having a lot of fun. With Lin Shui's bad temper, she wanted to control the divine battleship and kill the 10 Sir Gods instantly. However, she could not persuade Ji Tianxing and had endured until now. "Kid, how long are you going to play?" Lin Shui stared angrily at Ji Tianxing and asked in a deep voice. Ji Tianxing replied casually, "Soon. In a quarter of an hour at most, the big fish will take the bait." Shui Lin frowned and said unhappily, "Do you have to put in so much effort to deal with these small fries?" Ji Tianxing smiled. "It's precisely because they're small fries that we have to put in some effort to lure them into the trap. Otherwise, it will be just like the past 20 days. They have been following us in the dark, and they don't even have the guts to make a move." Shui Lin hesitated for a moment and said angrily, "Then don't use my godly battleship as bait. Take a look for yourself. Look at what you've done to my divine ship. If you want to bait them, why don't you use yourself as bait?" Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes as he explained, "If we don't show ourselves and hide in the divine ship, they won't be able to figure out what's going on. Only then will they fall for it. Don't you think it would be too fake if I appeared with my hair disheveled and covered in blood as bait? Would those people be fooled? I'm afraid he's running even faster, right?" Shui Lin was speechless. She could only stare at him, but didn't know what to say. Finally, the most difficult 15 minutes passed. Dozens of balls of divine light appeared in the sky from all directions. They were all rushing over like shooting stars. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of air-piercing sounds rang out. Hundreds of immortals arrived in a grandiose manner and stopped in the sky above the lake. The leader was a white-bearded old man dressed in gray linen clothes. He had the demeanor of a transcendent being. This person held a silver horsetail whisk in his hand and wore black cloth boots on his feet. He stood proudly in the sky. There were also 10 immortal lords in purple robes. They were of different shapes and sizes. They formed a circle in the sky. Behind every 2 immortal lords in purple robes, there were hundreds of immortal realm experts in armor. There were a total of 500 experts. They were all elites of 7th level immortal realm and above. With such a grand formation surrounding the divine warship, the atmosphere between heaven and earth immediately became somber. The 10 exhausted and blood-soaked immortal lords saw this scene, and their blood boiled with excitement. Many people heaved a sigh of relief. A few immortal lords even shed tears of excitement and cheered excitedly. "Lord Sectmaster, you're finally here. Fortunately, we did not disappoint you. We've stalled the enemy here." The white-bearded old man holding the horsetail whisk was the Sectmaster of the Flying Cloud sect, Nyefeyun. He glanced at the divine ship in the sky and looked at the 10 immortal lords with fervent eyes. He said in a booming voice, "Elders, the Flying Cloud sect is proud of all of you. I'll remember your contributions today. I'll definitely reward you after this. Moreover, I'll report this to the young prince after this. There will be great rewards then." When the 10 immortal lords heard this, they were instantly excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. It was as if all their previous fatigue and injuries had been swept away. Nyefeyun waved his hand and said with a peaceful expression, "Elders, please withdraw and recuperate from your injuries first. I'll leave the rest to them." The 10 immortal lords could not hold on any longer. They quickly acknowledged the order and retreated to the edge of the battlefield to take divine elixirs to heal their injuries. Then Nyefeyun looked at the divine ship and shouted, "Tianxing and his accomplices, listen up. I, Nyefeyun, am here with the disciples of the Flying Cloud sect. I order you to lay down your arms and surrender immediately. Otherwise, the Flying Cloud sect will do our best to kill all of you here. I advise you to surrender without putting up a fight. Don't make a mistake." The majestic voice reverberated in the sky, and it was deafening. The 500 over disciples of the Flying Cloud sect heard this, and their blood boiled with pride. However, there was no reaction from the divine ship. In the cockpit of the divine ship, Lin Shui, Sir Godblood Illusion, and Zhenhong looked at Ji Tianxing and asked questions. "Young master, what should we do now?" "Young man, the people of the Flying Cloud sect are all here. The game should be over, right?" "Young master, they have the advantage in numbers. Should we adopt a positional battle, a siege, a breakout battle, or a chase battle?" Under the gaze of the three of them, Ji Tianxing said slowly, "Don't be fooled by the Flying Cloud sect master's aggressive aura. In fact, he has been feeling guilty since I did not show up. He is so arrogant because he wants to test our strength. Once we charge out, the Flying Cloud sect will definitely disperse, and the old man will run away with his tail between his legs." Sir Godblood Illusion immediately creased his eyebrows and said worriedly, "Then what should we do? Should we continue to act weak, pretend to run away, and lengthen the battle line before killing them one by one?" Ji Tianxing waved his hand and chuckled. "Your idea is not bad, but it is too troublesome. This monarch has been acting for so long, just to lure them out, and then catch them all in one fell swoop." Lin Shui and Sir Godblood Illusion creased their eyebrows and looked confused. Ji Tianxing did not say anything else. After he said that, he left the divine ship. "Don't just stand there. Get ready to kill." Chapter 31:29. Nyefeyun held the horsetail whisk in his hand and looked at the divine warship with a proud expression. On the surface, he looked very confident and had a card up his sleeve. But in reality, his heart was also hanging in the air, waiting for the final answer. And the elders and disciples of the Flying Cloud sect were all infected by Nyefeyun's aura. Everyone believed that the divine warship had been damaged, and Tianxing and his companions were also arrows at the end of their flight, turtles in a jar. The shocking merit of capturing or killing Tianxing belonged to none other than them. Everyone held divine weapons and eyed the divine warship covetously, just waiting for the order of the sect master. Everyone would swarm forward and tear the divine warship to pieces. But at this moment, swoosh, divine light flashed, and a white figure appeared above the divine warship. Everyone's eyes were focused on that figure. It was a handsome black-haired youth wearing a white robe with cloud patterns. He was in high spirits, and his entire body was suffused with powerful divine might. He looked unscathed, and his essence, energy, and spirit were very full. He was clearly in peak condition. How did he look injured and weak at all? Seeing this scene, many elders and disciples were stunned. Nyefeyun also narrowed his eyes and his pupils constricted. He had a bad feeling in his heart. He's Tianqing, his appearance, bearing, and divine power aura all match. It's him. But isn't he seriously injured and weak? Why is he so high-spirited? Could it be that he's deliberately pretending to be strong and bluffing? Or maybe he's been acting before, and we've all been deceived by him? Thinking of this, Nie Feiyun was secretly vigilant. Of course, he couldn't just leave. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to complete Grand Prince Lian's mission and would lose face. He had to attack to test the other party's strength. At the same time, Ji Tianqing opened his mouth to speak. He ignored the 500 elite disciples, and his gaze fell on Nie Feiyun. He said with a light smile, "After waiting for so long, you're finally all here. For more than half a month, the Flying Cloud sect has been following me. Today, it's time to teach Grand Prince Lian a lesson." Hearing him say so, Nie Feiyun's eyes flickered with a cold light, and his mind was also pondering and analyzing. Was Ji Tianqing bluffing to deliberately scare him, or was he about to give a fatal blow? Nie Feiyun was helpless. He could not see through Ji Tianqing. He could only maintain his calm, and said in a cold tone, "Kid, I've long been used to the tricks of the real and the false. It doesn't matter if you're really injured or not. Since I've turned out in full force and surrounded you here, I definitely won't let you go. Now that you're a famous expert in both divine kingdoms, I'll give you a chance. As long as you allow yourself to be captured, this seat can hand you over to the little prince to deal with. At the very least, this seat can preserve some of your dignity and decency." Ji Tianqing immediately sneered and said, "Haha, you guys really don't understand this monarch. Now that things have come to this, you still want to probe this monarch's background? It was useless. It's time to end this." After saying that, he stopped talking nonsense with Nie Feiyun. He formed a divine seal with both hands and directly used his trump card. Heaven-destroying sword formation. In the next moment, he drew upon the power of the stars in outer space and condensed 20,000 divine swords that rained down like meteors. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sky within a radius of 10,000 miles was covered by the dazzling meteor shower. Before the sword radiance arrived, a violent sword intent that could suppress and crush everything came crashing down from the sky. More than 500 disciples of the Flying Cloud sect subconsciously looked up at the sky. Seeing the sword radiance that covered the sky, everyone's expression changed, and deep worry and fear appeared in their eyes. Nie Feiyun's expression also changed, and he exclaimed in his heart, "D****. He's going to use that sword formation again to seal off the area within a radius of 10,000 miles. Is he trying to prevent us from escaping? Is he trying to kill us all? He was indeed faking it before, and his injuries have already healed." At this moment, Nie Feiyun did not need to test the waters to guess the answer. He stepped back subconsciously and shouted, "Get out of my way! Retreat! Retreat!" Upon hearing his command, the 20 elders and 500 disciples were clearly stunned. Many of them were still in shock, and it was obvious that they did not react in time. Previously, the sect master was still very aggressive and full of divine might, seeming very confident. Why did he panic in the blink of an eye and even ask everyone to retreat? Even if Tianqing's injuries had recovered slightly, he should not be so terrifying, right? Although most of them were stunned, they still followed Nie Feiyun's order and quickly retreated. However, they were too slow. In the next moment, the huge divine swords that covered the sky descended and covered a radius of 3,000 miles. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In just a breath's time, 20,000 divine swords formed a sword net and sealed off the entire area. Nie Feiyun and more than 500 disciples and elders did not manage to escape. The crowd was a little flustered. The disciples' formation was messed up. Some were hesitating, and some were running away. Nie Feiyun's heart sank, and he realized that the situation was not good. He quickly shouted, "Stop! Everyone, get into a battle formation and defend with all your might." Those disciples who were at a loss for what to do were once again astonished. What the hell? Was the sect leader drunk too much? Just now, he told them to run away, and now he's telling them to get into a defensive formation? Although they were muttering in their hearts, these elite disciples still carried out their orders loyally. At this moment, the divine worship in the sky suddenly disappeared. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Three figures appeared in the sky. They were Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and Zhen Hong. A great battle broke out. Ji Tianxing controlled the Sky Destroyer sword formation and used 10,000 divine swords to kill the disciples of the Cloud Sect. Lin Shui dragged the long and narrow demon blade and created a blood-red storm that engulfed countless disciples of the Cloud Sect. Sir God Blood Illusion also used his ultimate skill and released a divine power that could destroy heaven and earth. Zhen Hong entered a frenzied state and transformed into a 1,000-foot-tall, dragon-blooded war goddess. He rampaged through the crowd and started a massacre. Swoosh, 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 boom, boom. 3,000 miles of heaven and earth were suddenly filled with colorful divine light and became chaotic. Endless sword radiance shuttled back and forth. Sword radiance intertwined with each other, and divine powers collided with each other. There was a loud bang that shook the 9 heavens. The battle had just broken out, and in less than 10 breaths, the Cloud Sect suffered heavy casualties. Close to 100 disciples died tragically under the sword formation and the attacks of Ji Tianxing and company. Their corpses were not intact. Dozens of disciples were severely injured. Their limbs were severed and blood splattered everywhere. Even those elders who had the strength of a middle-level divine lord could not escape the fate of being severely injured and covered in blood. This scene made the disciples of the Cloud Sect tremble in fear, and a thick fear rose in their hearts. They finally understood. They had been tricked. The divine worship was acting previously and pretending to be very weak. It wanted to lure the Cloud Sect into attacking first. Today, the Cloud Sect might be completely wiped out. Nie Feiyun had long guessed this and was mentally prepared. His original plan was to find out more about Ji Tianxing's strength and then decisively retreat and flee. But now that things had come to this, he realized that he had thought too simply. Ji Tianxing's methods and strength far exceeded his imagination. Chapter 31:30. Within the heaven-vanquishing sword formation with a radius of 3,000 miles. 7-color divine light shrouded heaven and earth. A storm that could destroy heaven and earth raged. Blood rain flew everywhere. Tragic cries rose and fell. Deafening loud, noises lingered on incessantly. Even though Nie Feiyun and a few elders joined forces and desperately intercepted Ji Tianxing, there were still 10 elders who also besieged Lin Shui and Godlord Blood Illusion without regard for their own safety. But they could not stop Ji Tianxing and Lin Shui at all, let alone stop them from going on a killing spree. With every breath that passed, there were several Flying Cloud Sect disciples who died tragically under the blade light and sword shadows. They were either decapitated or turned into a rain of blood that filled the sky. Even their divine sparks were also minced into pieces. Such a tragic scene made Nie Feiyun and the rest horrified and terror-stricken. Their hearts were also filled with grief, indignation, and despair. However, they could only watch helplessly but were powerless to stop it. Wanting to bring the disciples to break through the sword formation and escape this place also became an extravagant hope. Unknowingly, 100 breaths of time passed. 90% of the 500 elite disciples were slaughtered. Only 40 over people were still alive, but they were also covered in blood and covered in wounds. Close to half of the 20 middle-level Godlord elders were also killed. There were only 11 people left alive, including Nie Feiyun. Everyone was in a miserable state with weak abilities. Now that things had come to this, Flying Cloud Sect's defeat was already a foregone conclusion. There was no possibility of survival. Looking at the sky filled with blood rain, the lake's surface that was dyed red under his feet, and the miserable people around him, Nie Feiyun's heart was truly like dead ashes. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. Ha, it's all my fault. Even though Little Prince repeatedly warned me, and I was sufficiently cautious, I was still bewitched by him. In my eagerness for quick success, and with a fluke heart, I brought the sex elites out in full force. That's why such a tragedy happened. It's me who harmed the sex disciples. Tianxing, you goddamn bastard. What a vicious mind and means. Nie Feiyun's voice was hoarse, and he muttered with a desolate expression. In the end, it became a sorrowful cry. Even if I die here today, I will never give in. I must die with you. Nie Feiyun's white hair fluttered in the wind, and his whole body emitted a solemn and stirring aura. The surviving elders and disciples of the Flying Cloud sect were all affected by his aura. Their hearts were heavy and sorrowful, and their eyes were red and filled with tears. Even though they were defeated, they had forgotten their pain and were no longer afraid of death. All of them were brave warriors who would die without regrets. Nie Feiyun raised his arms and shouted, "Disciples of the Flying Cloud sect, charge with me. This time, if we don't succeed, we will die trying." As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed towards Ji Tianxing with his horsetail whisk and sword in hand. The 11 elders and more than 40 disciples were also determined to die. They waved their swords and sabers and launched a suicidal charge. Seeing this, Xuelin couldn't help but frown and whisper, "I didn't expect that old man to have some strength of character. He is a worthy opponent." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and smiled playfully. "No wonder you were always hurt. Fortunately, you met Xue Huan, Old Jean, and Xue Long. Otherwise, the Bloodblade sect wouldn't exist." Xuelin frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Let's wait and see." Then, he waved the sword of Burial of Heaven and charged forward. Sword radiance filled the sky as he attacked Nie Feiyun and the others. Xuelin didn't have the chance to ask any more questions. She dragged the Bloodblade and charged towards the people of the Flying Cloud sect, stirring up a bloody storm. A fierce battle took place once again. Boom, 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 boom. The light of the divine skills that covered the sky collided fiercely in the sky. Thousands of divine swords poured down like a rain of arrows, accurately assassinating the people of the Flying Cloud sect. Dazzling divine light and blood splattered everywhere. In less than 10 breaths, more than 40 disciples of the Flying Cloud sect were killed. Then, the 11 elders also died one after another. They had been seriously injured, and their strength had decreased greatly. They couldn't even defeat Jin Hong, left Emissary Jean, and Xue Long. After another 100 breaths of time, the heaven-shaking and earth-shaking battle gradually stopped. The 11 elders were all dead. The Flying Cloud sect was almost completely annihilated, and only one person was still alive. There was no doubt that it was Nie Feiyun. Ji Tianxing and the others stopped attacking and surrounded Nie Feiyun. Everyone's gaze gathered on him, and they sized him up with a strange look. Even though his injuries were even worse than before, and he looked even more miserable than before. But if one observed carefully, they would realize that although his injuries looked terrifying, they weren't fatal. Even Xuelin, who was careless, felt that something was amiss. This old man actually survived, and he didn't even break an arm or a leg. When he was fighting just now, he looked very brave, but in actual fact, he had been dodging. Sir God Xue Huan quickly reminded him through voice transmission, "Sectmaster, Mr. Tianxing saw through the old man's thoughts long ago. Just wait and see." Ji Tianxing put away the sword of Burial of Heaven, looked at Nie Feiyun with a smile, and asked, "Old man, you lived to the end as you wished, and all your elders and disciples are dead. Now, just tell me what you want to do." Nie Feiyun was seen through, but he didn't feel embarrassed at all. His expression didn't change, and he still looked solemn and tough. He said in a hoarse voice, "Tianxing, although the Flying Cloud sect is your enemy and was ordered to encircle and annihilate you again, the Flying Cloud sect had no choice but to do so. However, the Flying Cloud sect was forced to do so because they had no other choice. They don't have any deep hatred for you. Now, our elders and disciples have died bravely in battle. They are all righteous and loyal warriors. I hope you don't humiliate them." Ji Tianxing nodded and said casually, "Anyway, they died without an intact corpse, and were buried in the lake. How can I humiliate them? Niefei Yun continued. I made a wrong judgment and gave the wrong order, which led to the death of our elders and disciples. Logically speaking, after making such a huge mistake, I should go to hell with the elders and disciples to apologize to them. However, I know very well that taking my own life is a coward's act, and they don't wish to see me kill myself. Moreover, I still have to take care of the surviving disciples and the families of the disciples who died in battle. When they heard that, Ji Tianxing, Sir God-Blood Illusion, and the others let out a cold smile. Even Lin Shui could tell that something was amiss. She said with disdain, "Old man, don't you just want Tianxing to spare your life? Even when you're begging for mercy, you can make it sound so righteous, sorrowful, and solemn. You're really hypocritical." Niefei Yun ignored Lin Shui's words and looked at Ji Tianxing calmly. He said, "I've lived for over 20,000 years. I've experienced everything in my life, and I've become indifferent to it. As long as you're magnanimous, I'll do my best to help you and follow your lead, to help you achieve your wish." Lin Shui was completely convinced. She pointed at Niefei Yun and scolded, "Old man, it's really impressive that you could be so shameless to this extent. Previously, I thought you had a backbone, but I didn't expect you to be even more hypocritical than those who curry favor with those in power." Chapter 31:31. Reality proved that Ji Tianxing had seen through Niefei Yun's thoughts long ago, and Lin Shui had misjudged Niefei Yun, thinking that he was a sanctimonious person with integrity. So, Lin Shui was very angry. Ji Tianxing turned to look at Lin Shui and chuckled. "Fortunately, you met me, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable." Lin Shui glared at him angrily, unable to refute. Lord Shui Huan quickly comforted her. "Sect Master, you don't have to be so angry. That old man had no choice but to do this in order to survive. This is the way of survival for small sects and experienced people. There is nothing to scold. If he was really a heroic person with integrity, he might not have survived until today. Also, the old man said himself, he has experienced everything in his life. Other than death, he has seen through everything. Why would he care about dignity and integrity?" Left Emissary Jean quickly nodded in agreement and said, "Sect Master, that old man is a smart person. Otherwise, how could he become the leader of a sect and coax the disciples? Even if he admitted defeat and begged young Master Tianxing to spare his life, he could have said it so righteously, at least he would not have lost face. If he had not met young Master Tianxing and had Prince Lien as his backer, he might not have done this. But he fell into our hands. If he did not do this, how could he survive?" Hearing the two's advice, Lin Shui's anger subsided a lot, but she still glared at Shui Huan, left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon fiercely, scolding with a stern expression. "I am warning you if one day you become as hypocritical and shameless as that old man. Don't blame me for cleaning up the sect." Shui Huan, left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon all shrunk their necks and shook their heads, saying that they did not dare. At this time, Ji Tianxing looked at Niefei Yun expressionlessly and asked, "You're a smart person. I don't need to say any nonsense. I believe you know it. Since you want to live and work for me, what qualifications and abilities do you have? How dare you say that you will help me achieve my wish?" Niefei Yun had long expected him to say this. He explained in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I know that my strength is lacking. In terms of divine arts and techniques, I'm not worth mentioning in front of you. But this old man is from the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and has lived here for more than 20,000 years. I have a thorough understanding of the Divine Kingdom. Even the monarch and Grand Prince Lien don't know as much about this divine nation as I do. Moreover, I'm good at tracking, concealing, and investigating. That's why I created the Flying Cloud Sect. In the entire Raging Flame Divine Kingdom, the Cloud Sect's ability to gather information was second to none. Moreover, this old man has been working for Prince Lien for a long time, so I know a lot of top-secret information. Young Master will definitely be interested." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said with a cold smile, You're quite scheming. You know where your value lies. That's why you dare to bet that this sovereign will use you. But have you ever thought that Ben June has always been frivolous and conceited? If I don't want to use you and just kill you, what are you going to do? As he spoke, a terrifying killing intent burst out from his body and enveloped Nyefeyun. When Nyefeyun was attacked by the cold killing intent, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar and his body trembled. But he tried his best to remain calm and said with a calm expression, "If I fall into young master's hands, it's natural for this old man to lose his life. It'll be fortunate if I can survive. If young master wants to kill me, this old man is powerless. In any case, this old man has lived for too long and has always been alone. There's nothing to worry about. It doesn't matter if this old man dies, but if young master wants to inquire about Grand Prince Lien's secrets, you'll have to go through a lot of trouble." Ji Tianxing nodded and said with a chuckle, "Ha! You're indeed smarter and better than Prince Lien's other lackeys in judging the situation. But have you thought about it? This sovereign has mastered the soul-refining technique. If I kill you and seize your memories, won't I know everything?" Nyefeyun's expression remained unchanged. He bowed and said, "Young master's methods are heaven-defying, and your foundation is deep. This old man isn't surprised that you've mastered such a method. But there's one thing that young master doesn't know. Since this old man was able to establish the Flying Cloud sect and was placed in an important position by Grand Prince Lien, acting as his informant and scout, there's also a reason. This old man also cultivated a kind of destiny, divine ability. At the instant of death, it can wipe out most of the divine soul memories. This way, even if you cast the soul-refining technique, you can only obtain some unimportant information. This old man can keep the most crucial secrets. That's why Grand Prince Lien dares to trust and put this old man in an important position." Hearing up to here, Lin Shui, God Lord Blood Illusion, Zhan Hong, and the rest exchanged glances, all revealing looks of realization. Only then did everyone understand. No wonder Nyefeyun had the confidence, daring to beg for mercy and negotiate with Ji Tianxing. Lin Shui was somewhat stifled and muttered to herself, "Damn old thing. No wonder he's so arrogant. But does he really think that we can't do anything to him? At most, we'll kill him with one blade. We won't be curious about those secrets of his." She originally thought that Ji Tianxing was confident and haughty and definitely would not be restrained by Nyefeyun. But she did not expect that Ji Tianxing actually did not get angry and even nodded his head in agreement. "Good. Your calmness and steadiness. This lord admires it very much. In addition, this lord also wants to see what capabilities you have and how many secrets you've grasped. Today, I'll spare your life and allow you to follow by this lord's side, serving at any time." Seeing Ji Tianxing spare Nyefeyun, Lin Shui frowned fiercely, very much wanting to open her mouth to stop. Nyefeyun heaved a sigh of relief, as if relieved of a heavy burden. He hurriedly put away his treasured sword and held the horsetail whisk, bowing deeply. "Young master is unfathomable to begin with, and your strength is formidable. Also, you have such noble character and unquestionable integrity, and are deeply righteous. This old man truly admires you." Now, this old man increasingly feels that young master's strength, talent, vision, and methods all surpass Grand Prince Lien. Compared to Grand Prince Lien, perhaps you're this old man's wise master. Lin Shui's teeth ached from listening. She repeatedly pursed her lips and said disdainfully, "This flattery is really loud." Just now, he still had the appearance of an otherworldly expert, and in the blink of an eye, he became a lackey. Really makes people. Nyefeyun pretended not to hear these words, walked towards Ji Tianxing with a calm expression, and bowed once more. This old man, Nyefeyun, solemnly greets young Master Tianxing. From today onwards, this old servant is young master's servant at your side, at your disposal. After this bow, it meant that he admitted defeat and surrendered and was willing to follow Ji Tianxing. After getting up, he consciously stretched out his palms and said with a calm expression, "Young master, if you want to cast any spells, talismans, or shackles, please feel free to do so." Obviously, he had long guessed that Ji Tianxing did not trust him. He would definitely use some method, such as using his life as a hostage, in order to control him. Ji Tianxing's eyes turned golden. He stared at Nie Feiyun for a while, and then said, "The purple mark in your soul, is it the talisman that Grand Prince Lien planted to hasten your death?" Nie Feiyun nodded and said, "Young master's eyes are as sharp as torches. That was the revenant god seal planted by Grand Prince Lien more than 20 years ago. It could be detonated with a thought and take this old man's life." Ji Tianxing chuckled and said, "If that's the case, then I don't need to go through so much trouble. I'll just add a little something to the revenant god seal." Chapter 31-32. Upon hearing Ji Tianxing's words, Nie Feiyun was stunned. He didn't understand. What did he mean? Ji Tianxing didn't explain. He formed a seal with both hands and shot out dozens of divine lights into Nie Feiyun's mind. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the blink of an eye, the dozens of divine lights formed a walnut-sized golden seal that enveloped the departed soul seal. In just 2 breaths, Ji Tianxing finished casting and retracted his hands. Nie Feiyun was still in a daze. He used his divine sense to sense the seal in his mind. After pondering for a long time, his expression changed. He was extremely shocked. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Ji Tianxing with excitement. "Young master, you actually cut off the connection between Prince Lien and the departed soul seal?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, "From now on, Prince Lien can no longer control your life and death." What he meant was that from now on, his life and death were in his hands. Nie Feiyun was well aware of this, but he was still surprised and happy. He quickly bowed. It's a miracle that young master could achieve this in just 2 breaths. With regards to young master's methods and abilities, this old man is truly in awe. At this moment, Nie Feiyun felt more and more that joining Ji Tianxing was the wisest choice. It wasn't just because Ji Tianxing's abilities and methods were better than Prince Lien's. More importantly, Prince Lien had always been arrogant because of his noble status. He had always beaten, scolded, and even killed his guards and servants at will. In the outside world, Nie Feiyun had the demeanor of an immortal. But in front of Prince Lien, he could only nod his head and bow, speaking humbly like a lackey. However, Nie Feiyun could see Ji Tianxing's temperament through this short period of contact. Although he was arrogant, he wasn't as ruthless as Prince Lien. At the very least, Ji Tianxing was a merciful and fair ruler. Shuai Lin curled her lips and grumbled, "How many times have you flattered in such a short time? Don't you feel ashamed?" This time, Nie Feiyun didn't evade. He bowed to her and said seriously, "Miss, this old man greets you. Although you are somewhat disdainful of this old man's methods, what this old man said just now was from the bottom of his heart. You're young master Tianxing's companion. You should know better than this old man how powerful young master is, right?" Shuai Lin choked and was speechless for a moment. Of course, she couldn't refute. Otherwise, it would mean that she was looking down on Ji Tianxing. After a moment of silence, she said angrily, "Even if that's the case, none of us are flattering like you. You're able to live to this age because of your bootlicking skills, aren't you?" Nie Feiyun didn't get angry. He smiled and said, "If Miss thinks so, then let's take it that way." Then he greeted Sir Godblood Illusion, Zhan Hong, Left Emissary Jean, Blood Dragon, and the others. After a simple and awkward exchange of greetings, everyone got to know each other. Ji Tianxing knew that everyone couldn't accept Nie Feiyun as a companion for the time being. It was also awkward standing there. Thus, he waved his hand and ordered, "Don't just stand there. Go clean up the battlefield." Lin Shui, Sir Godblood Illusion, and the others hurriedly went to clean up the battlefield and plunder the spoils of war. Ji Tianxing also removed the Sky Destroyer Sword formation and stood in the sky with Nie Feiyun, asking him about the situation. "Since you're Prince Lien's confidant, you should know his next plan, right?" Nie Feiyun nodded. "Of course I know." After the incident at the God-burying mountain range, young master's name spread throughout the raging flame divine kingdom. Even the royal family has heard of him. Prince Lien didn't dare to attack rashly and could only gather the power of the 9 great sects to form an encirclement around the divine kingdom. As young master kept going south, the encirclement kept shrinking. Prince Lien's final goal is to complete the encirclement outside the raging flame divine kingdom and have a decisive battle with you. Of course, now that the Flying Cloud sect has been removed, there are only 8 great sects under Prince Lien. Sure enough, it's as I expected. Ji Tianqing nodded and sneered. He isn't my match, and there aren't any top powerhouses under his command that can kill me. In the current situation, he can only do this. There's no other way. Right. What about the powerhouses of the Heavenly Union sect's Raging Flame branch? Did they participate in the encirclement? Nie Feiyun shook his head. No. These 9 great sects were subdued by Prince Lien. Although they work for him, he doesn't trust them completely. The Heavenly Union sect is his true confidant and backer. The powerhouses of the Raging Flame branch stayed in the royal city to protect him and stand by at any time. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and sneered. So Prince Lien has been hiding in the royal city to recuperate? How are his injuries? How much did he recover? Nie Feiyun had an awkward expression as he guiltily said, "To tell you the truth, Prince Lien is extremely wary and doesn't completely trust the forces he subdued. Only the 2 sect masters of the Raging Flame branch and a few of his trusted aides knew the location of his seclusion and the progress of his recovery. I don't know his specific situation, but I can judge from the clues that he should still need a month to recover. After all, the 8 great sects will close the encirclement and join hands to kill you in a month. Prince Lien will definitely come in person." Ji Tianqing nodded and muttered, "Even if he can only recover 80% of his injuries in a month, it's still very shocking. It can be seen that he has a lot of resources, divine pills, or the help of a peak divine doctor." Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing asked, "Prince Lien actually has so many forces and supporters in the Raging Flame divine kingdom. Could it be that the royal family isn't afraid? Or could it be that Prince Lien is also related to the royal family?" He recalled the matter of the Blood Flame divine kingdom. Prince Lien intended to help the 5th prince ascend the throne and control the Blood Flame divine kingdom. Thus, he couldn't help but be suspicious of the relationship between Prince Lien and the royal family. Nie Feiyun had an expression of admiration as he cupped his hands and said, "This old man was just about to remind young master, but I didn't expect young master to already have doubts. This old man truly admires you." That's right. Prince Lien and the Raging Flame royal family had an inexplicable relationship. Although on the surface, they don't have any dealings and are very polite and well-behaved. But this old man has been observing for a dozen years and found many coincidences as well as inexplicable matters. Over time, this old man gradually became convinced that Prince Lien is definitely related to the royal family. Moreover, this old man also investigated and found that before the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom's ruler ascended the throne a few decades ago, Prince Lien secretly helped him. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing had an answer in his heart. He sneered and said in a playful tone, "So, this prince entering the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom is tantamount to sending a sheep into a wolf's den?" Chapter 31-33. Not long after Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others finished cleaning up the battlefield, they collected a large number of spoils. There were hundreds of divine weapons and interspatial rings, as well as thousands of Godhead fragments. Those Godhead fragments were naturally given to Ji Tianqing. As for the divine weapons and interspatial rings, they were given to Ji Tianqing to distribute. During this process, they did not avoid Nie Feiyun, although those spoils came from Nie Feiyun's disciples. Nie Feiyun consciously retreated to the side and watched silently. His expression did not change. Lin Shui noticed this and despised Nie Feiyun even more. She secretly scolded him for being cold-blooded and heartless. However, Ji Tianqing, Blood Illusion, Zhen Hong, and the others could guess Nie Feiyun's state of mind. No matter how uncomfortable they were, they could not show it at this moment. After all, Nie Feiyun had just joined Ji Tianqing. How could they let Ji Tianqing harbor ill feelings and doubts? Ji Tianqing was not very interested in the divine weapons and interspatial rings. He had already accumulated hundreds of billions worth of cultivation resources. Not only did he have the Bloody Flame's sacred tree, but he also had an endless supply of energy stones from the five elements realm. He, Yin Yao, Ji Ku, and the others would not lack cultivation resources for many years to come. Only quasi-king level and king level divine weapons and treasures could arouse his interest. Therefore, he distributed the divine weapons and interspatial rings equally to Lin Shui, Blood Illusion, Zhen Hong, and the others. This action made everyone very happy and grateful. They accepted the spoils excitedly and could not wait to check their gains. The items in each interspatial ring were different. Therefore, the final gains were all based on luck. Nie Feiyun watched all this silently. Other than the sadness and depression in his heart, he also had a deeper understanding of Ji Tianxing. Extremely shrewd and ruthless, but very tolerant and magnanimous to the people around him. This person will definitely become someone great. His breadth of mind and outlook are far beyond Prince Lian's. This was Nie Feiyun's impression and evaluation of Ji Tianxing. After a while, Lin Shui took out the divine ship. Everyone boarded the divine ship and continued their journey. It was still the left emissary Jean and the right emissary of the Blood Dragon, who took turns to steer the divine warship and continued to fly south. The two of them had long refined the divine light that Ji Tianxing had gifted them, and they had grasped the basics of the detection divine ability. What was interesting was that left emissary Jean had a divine art that could strengthen one's consciousness, while Blood Dragon right emissary had an eye technique divine art. The two of them worked together and used their divine abilities to investigate the situation. It was a two-pronged attack, and it was very difficult to miss anything. This discovery made the two of them extremely happy. They secretly admired Ji Tianxing's meticulous thinking. Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest entered the secret chamber to count their gains. Ji Tianxing and Nie Feiyun stayed in the meeting hall to talk. Ji Tianxing still had a lot of information to learn about the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and Prince Lian. Old Nie, Prince Lian should have received the news by now, right? How would he react when he found out that the Flying Cloud sect had been completely annihilated? What plans and arrangements would he have for the next step? Furthermore, without the Flying Cloud sect as his eyes, does he still have a backup information channel? Ji Tianxing asked a lot of questions this time, but Nie Feiyun answered in an orderly manner. With the experience of the previous failures, even if Prince Lian is furious, he will quickly calm down. That's because when he found out that the Flying Cloud sect had taken the initiative to attack, he was already furious and expected the Flying Cloud sect to fail. Next, he will definitely strictly order the 8 great sects not to take the initiative to attack, so as to avoid being defeated one by one. Before he has the confidence to kill you, he can only carry out the original plan and let the 8 great sects continue to surround you. As for the information channel, losing the Flying Cloud sect is equivalent to losing an eye, but it's not to the extent of being completely blind. The Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect are the strongest among the 8 great sections. They also have a large number of scouts and set up intelligence networks in the various counties. The other 6 sects are also deeply rooted in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and have close relations with the various sections. They can also gather a lot of information. Ji Tianxing frowned and said in a deep voice, "Not only that, Prince Lian might have an even more powerful ally who can provide accurate information." Nie Feiyun was startled, but he soon understood what Lin Yun meant and asked, "Young master, are you talking about the Raging Flame royal family? That's very possible. We have to guard against it." Ji Tianxing remained silent as he inwardly calculated. Although I'm already a high divine monarch and could defeat any of the powerhouses under Prince Lian, he doesn't personally appear in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. But he didn't show himself, and only let the 8 great sects attack me together. And he's hiding in the Raging Flame Royal City, holding the Heavenly Fusion Sect's Raging Flame branch as his trump card. Even the Raging Flame Royal family might become his accomplice. I definitely can't sit still and let the 8 great sects besiege me while being chased by Prince Lian and the Raging Flame branch. I have to think of a way to break the encirclement of the 8 great sects. Thinking of this, Ji Tianxing asked, Old Nya, give this young master a map of the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom and mark the approximate locations of the 8 great sections. Nya Feiyin thought for a moment before nodding. Okay, please wait a moment. After a short 100 breaths, Nya Feiyin took out a map with 8 circles marked on it. Young master, the last time this old man received the information was a day ago. That was the approximate location of the 8 great sections. Now that a day has passed, the positions of the 8 great sects must have changed, but it shouldn't be by much. Ji Tianxing took the map and carefully observed it. The 8 circles were connected to form an oval encirclement, and in the northern part of the encirclement was the heavenly fire lake. The southernmost part of the encirclement was about 5 million kilometers north of the Raging Flame Royal City. Ji Tianxing frowned. According to the current situation, the encirclement will close in about half a month. At that time, the 8 great sects will fight us in the central part of the Heavenly Wolf County. Nya Feiyu nodded. Your estimation is very accurate. This is also Prince Lian's plan. Ji Tianxing continued. The 8 great sects don't dare to take the initiative to attack. They even want to keep a distance from me. Even if I take the initiative to attack and defeat them one by one, unfortunately, I'm too far away and it's very difficult to accurately find them. Nya Feiyin thought for a moment before trying. This old man can pretend to be seriously injured and escape. I can send a message to them. Without waiting for him to finish, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, If this method works, we can indeed set up an ambush in advance and eliminate the main forces of a few sections. But Prince Lian is very vigilant and suspicious. He will definitely warn the 8 great sections. If you don't send a message or show yourself, Prince Lian and the 8 great sects will think that you died in battle. Once you send a message, Prince Lian will definitely guess that you've defected. This, Nya Feiyin was speechless and could only remain silent. Ji Tianxing was silent for a long time before he made up his mind. If we want to break the encirclement of the 8 great sects, there's another way. We can take drastic measures and directly destroy their sect and foundation. Chapter 31-34. Nya Feiyun's body stiffened, his face full of shock. Young master, aren't you being too ruthless? He was also a smart person, so he naturally knew that Ji Tianxing's method was feasible. Once the headquarters and gates of the 8 great sects were destroyed, the elites of the 8 great sects would definitely lose their will to fight and panic. At that time, Prince Lian's inescapable net would fall apart. But this method was truly too ruthless. The elite forces of the 8 great sects were outside on expeditions, carrying out Prince Lian's mission. Those left at the gates and headquarters were basically the old, weak, sick, disabled, and their family members. Ji Tianxing expressionlessly looked at Nya Feiyun and calmly said, This monarch isn't an executioner, but I'm also not a good person. You should have a deep understanding of this. Since the 8 great sect want to kill this monarch, how can this monarch be lenient with them? If you want to blame someone, you can only blame them for being loyal to Prince Lian and not making an enemy out of this monarch. Nya Feiyun immediately turned silent and didn't say anything else, because he clearly knew that Ji Tianxing's method wasn't excessive. This was a life and death struggle, and the winner was king, who would talk about morality and benevolence. If he had Ji Tianxing's strength and abilities, he would also do the same without hesitation. Thinking of this, Nya Feiyun inwardly sighed. Myriad Flow Sect, Divine Blade Union, and 6 Path Sects. You will soon face a great calamity. This old man wants to help, but is unable to. You're on your own now. At this time, Ji Tianxing handed the map of the Raging Flame Divine Country to Nya Feiyun. You should know where the headquarters and gates of the 8 great sects are located, right? Mark them on the map. Nya Feiyun didn't dare to neglect Ji Tianxing's order and promptly marked them on the map. Soon, he marked out 8 locations on the map. After thinking for a moment, he added 3 more marks. Seeing this, Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and asked, Why are there 3 more marks? Could it be that there are 3 sects that are crafty and have 3 burrows? Young master is wise. Niefeyun quickly nodded and explained. The Myriad Flow sect and the Divine Saber Union are both large sects that have existed for over 10,000 years, even though they were like all the other sects and had a fixed mountain gate and headquarters. However, they had secretly established a branch many years ago and transferred many elite disciples, resources, and wealth. Among the 6 sects, the Spirit Sword sect also imitated the practice of the Divine Blade Union and the 10,000 Streams sect. However, the Spirit Sword sect was a second-rate sect, and its strength was not as good as the other 2 sections. Thus, it was difficult for them to have a group of elite disciples and elders. Therefore, they secretly built a treasury, and nearly half of their wealth and resources are hidden in that treasury. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing said with a playful smile, "These are the secrets of the major sections. How do you know so clearly?" "Young master, you must be joking." Niefeyun humbly bowed and said, "The other sects may have done the same thing, but this old man doesn't know." The reason why this old man knows about the secret treasure house of the Spirit Sword sect is because many years ago, I had a grudge with the Spirit Sword sect. This old man secretly investigated for many years and finally found the secret treasure house of the Spirit Sword sect. When I was about to lead the sect's powerhouses to attack the treasury, Prince Lien stopped me. At that time, this old man knew that the Spirit Sword sect was the same as our sect, subdued by Prince Lien. Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. He stared at the map for a few times and decided on the plan. We will soon leave the Heavenly Fire Lake. The closest sect to us is the Blue Thunder sect. In addition, the headquarters of the Spirit Moon sect, Flying Rainbow sect, and Overlord Pavilion are not too far away from us. The furthest ones are the Spirit Sword sect, the 10,000 Streams sect, and the Divine Blade Union. In that case, let's start with the Blue Thunder sect. Niefeyun had no objection. He bowed and said, "As per young master's order, this old man will do his best to fight." Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said, "You don't have to participate in the first battle. Go into seclusion and heal your injuries for a few days." Although Niefeyun's 4 limbs were intact, and he seemed to be able to move freely, his injuries were very serious. However, he was indeed badly injured, and his strength was very weak. It was not easy for him to hold on until now. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, he showed a grateful look and hurriedly bowed to express his gratitude. Then, Niefeyun chose a secret room and went into seclusion to heal his injuries. Ji Tianqing went to the cockpit of the divine ship and ordered Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon, Right Emissary, turn to the southeast and go to the Thunder Sound Mountain. Left Emissary Jean and Blood Dragon, Right Emissary, both showed a puzzled look. They subconsciously asked, "Young master, why are we going to the Thunder Sound Mountain? Aren't we going to continue to the south?" Ji Tianqing didn't explain too much. He chuckled and said, "Are you happy to take you to kill people and steal their treasures?" "Of course I'm happy." Left Emissary Jean answered without hesitation. Blood Dragon, Right Emissary quietly pulled him and said with a slightly embarrassed expression, "Ahem, we are not bandits, and neither is young Master Tianqing. How can we kill people and steal their treasures? If I'm not wrong, young Master must be taking the initiative to cut off Prince Lien's wings one by one, right?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right." Left Emissary Jean mumbled, "What's the difference?" Ji Tianqing didn't say anything more. He turned and left the cockpit. After he left, Blood Dragon Right Emissary hurriedly pulled Left Emissary Jean and reminded him, "Old Jean, don't forget Master's words. If we become villains who burn, kill, and rob, Master will punish us. So, we can't be so straightforward. We have to be tactful." Left Emissary Jean rolled his eyes. "Isn't that hypocrisy? Just like that old man Niefeyun. Don't forget, Master said that if we become like Niefeyun, she will punish us too." Ahem. Blood Dragon, Right Emissary choked. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Master always talks about punishing us. It's quite scary. Young Master Tianqing is the best. He only gives us benefits and never threatens us. Left Emissary Jean nodded in agreement. "Yes. So, following young Master Tianxing is the only way to live a good life. I've gained weight recently. No, I've accumulated a large amount of resources recently, and my strength has more than doubled. The two talked for a while, then stopped and continued to drive the divine ship. 3 days later, in a Thunder Sound mountain, for a million miles away from the heavenly fire lake. It was evening. The sun was setting in the west, and the sky was filled with the glow of the sunset. In the depths of the majestic and boundless mountain range, there was a giant mountain that was more than 2,000 feet tall, towering among the other mountains. The white sea of clouds covered half of the mountain. The top of the giant mountain was above the vast sea of clouds. It was like a floating island in the sea of clouds, partly hidden and partly visible. This floating island had a radius of 100 miles. It was man-made and the terrain was flat. On the top of the mountain, there were dozens of splendid palaces. This was the mountain gate of the Blue Thunder sect, where more than 3,000 disciples lived and cultivated. Looking from afar, the Blue Thunder sect was magnificent and ethereal, like an otherworldly paradise. Chapter 31-35. The Blue Thunder sect was as peaceful as ever. In the past, the Blue Thunder sect was only a second-rate sect, far inferior to the top forces like the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing sect, not to mention the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. They had several hostile forces even in the same county. However, since decades ago, the Blue Thunder sect had turned to Prince Lien. They had been on a meteoric rise. Not only had they eradicated several hostile forces, but they had also dominated a county. Their power had also increased by several times. In recent decades, the Blue Thunder sect had been expanding and growing, but had been smooth sailing. It was all thanks to Prince Lien's blessing. Naturally, the Blue Thunder sect had to do their best to serve Prince Lien. A month ago, Prince Lien had ordered the Blue Thunder sect to send their main force and elite forces to kill a young man from a foreign tribe named Tianxing. The Blue Thunder sect dared not neglect it. The sect leader led 9 elders, more than 20 deacons, and 400 elite disciples to carry out the mission. From then on, there were only the deputy sect leader, 7 deacons, and more than 2,000 disciples left in the Blue Thunder sect. It sounded like there were still a lot of people. But in reality, most of the 2,000 over disciples were outer sect disciples, and their strength was also ordinary. Obviously, the power of the Green Thunder sect was very weak. However, the Blue Thunder sect had always been domineering. With Prince Lien as their backer, no one dared to provoke them. Even if their main force and elite forces were sent out, the Blue Thunder sect was not worried at all. Which idiot dared to behave atrociously in the Blue Thunder sect? Wasn't that courting death? After a month, the truth was as expected. The Blue Thunder sect was still peaceful. There were no abnormalities or accidents. But today, the long-lasting peace was broken. Swish, 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 swish. Tens of thousands of starlight suddenly appeared in the blue sky. Like a dense meteor shower, they fell at an incredible speed. In an instant, the setting sun was blocked out. As the 20,000 meteors fell, the supreme power that suppressed the world and destroyed everything enveloped the entire mountain. The protective array of the Blue Thunder sect was also activated on the spot. Swish! A colorful light shield with a radius of 200 miles appeared between heaven and earth, covering the entire mountain. This monarch grade high gray divine array was operating at full power, pushing its defensive power to the maximum. At the same time, the defensive formation was still flashing with divine light and making ear-piercing noises to warn the people of the Blue Thunder sect. In less than 2 breaths, hundreds of people were alarmed. More than 400 disciples in green robes and several deacons rushed out of the palaces and looked up at the sky. In the next instant, everyone saw an unforgettable scene. The starlight that covered the sky was not a shooting star. Instead, it was 20,000 gigantic swords that were thousands of feet tall. Boom, 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 boom. 20,000 giant swords converged into a torrential downpour. They violently slammed into the sect protecting formation, causing a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens. The seemingly indestructible protective formation only lasted for an instant before it was blasted into pieces and collapsed on the spot. Ka. The great defensive array within a radius of 200 miles actually turned into fragments that filled the sky, splashing in all directions. However, the power of the divine swords that filled the sky had yet to dissipate, and they continued to attack downwards. Without the protection of the sect-protecting formation, the Green Thunder sect was extremely weak. Boom, boom, boom. Another loud explosion that shook the heavens and the earth spread across a radius of 10,000 miles. Dozens of magnificent palaces were blasted into pieces on the spot. The deacons and hundreds of disciples did not have time to dodge or defend themselves. They were directly blasted into pieces. Even the 2,000 feet tall giant mountain was blasted into pieces by the divine giant swords and collapsed into a huge ruin. In just a few breaths, the Green Thunder sect's mountain gate was destroyed. Not only were the buildings completely destroyed, but the entire giant mountain was also turned into ruins. More than 2,000 disciples and a few deacons had all died without even knowing what had happened. Only a middle-aged deity clan member in a purple robe dashed out of the ruins, covered in blood, and rushed into the sky with disheveled hair. He was the deputy lord of the Green Thunder sect, an upper-level divine lord at the 7th level of the divine lord realm. Under the attack of the divine swords that filled the sky, he was lucky enough to survive, but he was also scared out of his wits. Looking at the tragic scene around him, he was both angry and frightened. He trembled all over and roared at the sky. Why? What did our sect do wrong? More than 2,000 disciples. Our foundation for thousands of years. Our life's work. How, Ian? Why are you so cruel to send down heaven's punishment to destroy all of this? Obviously, the vice sect master subconsciously thought that this was a punishment from heaven. If it was not for Hao Ian's punishment, how could the Green Thunder sect's mountain gate be destroyed in an instant? How could a few deacons and more than 2,000 disciples be turned into ashes in an instant? Besides Hao Ian's punishment, who else could create such a miracle? The vice sect master could not figure it out. He was both angry and desperate. At this time, 20,000 giant swords formed a sword array that covered a radius of 1,000 miles. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The giant swords crisscrossed and flew back and forth as fast as lightning, killing everything in their path. The vice sect master had the strength of the 7th firmament realm, but he could not block the thousands of swords. He just held on for a few breaths and was crushed into pieces by the thousands of swords. Even his godhood was shattered. Then, the sky full of giant swords continued to kill for 10 breaths of time. The ruins and mounds of earth formed by the collapse of the giant mountain peak were also crushed into pieces and scattered between heaven and earth. When the heaven punishment sword array dissipated, the land within a radius of 1,000 miles became flat ground. Not even a complete tile was left. Such a scene was as if the Green Thunder sect had disappeared into thin air. Above the vast sea of clouds, Ji Tianxing, Xuelin, and the others stood there quietly, watching everything in silence. An entire mountain gate was destroyed just like that. Such a destructive means is comparable to heaven's punishment. No wonder that guy misunderstood. Lin Xuel looked at the vast expanse of flat land and could not help but sigh. Sir God Blood Illusion nodded and said regretfully, "It's a pity that young master controlled the thousands of swords to destroy everything." The wealth and cultivation resources that the Green Thunder sect had accumulated for many years were also destroyed. There is not much left. Emissary Jean thought of something and asked worriedly, "Young master, you destroyed the Green Thunder sect's mountain gate to destroy their fighting spirit. However, the entire mountain gate was destroyed and no one was left alive. How did the news get out? How did the Green Thunder sect master and the elite forces know that their mountain gate was gone?" Ji Tianxing said calmly, "No matter what method or means, the Green Thunder sect master and the mountain gate are connected. He definitely knows that something happened to the sect. However, we need to add fuel to the fire. Old Jean, go to the nearest city with Blood Dragon and spread the news that the Green Thunder sect's mountain gate was destroyed. It must be exaggerated and shocking enough, and insist that the Green Thunder sect had met with heaven's punishment. Left emissary Jean was filled with emotions. Young master, there is no need to exaggerate or embellish anything. We just need to tell the truth, and it will scare countless people to death. Chapter 31-36. After destroying the gate of the Blue Thunder sect, Ji Tianxing and the others left quietly. An hour later, the group arrived at the nearest city. There were 5 cities and more than 30 towns in the Thundersound Mountain. As for Blue Thunder City, it was the most prosperous of all the cities and towns. It also had the largest population. Most importantly, the city was under the jurisdiction of the Blue Thunder sect. Many families of the disciples of the Blue Thunder sect lived in the city. The left emissary Jean, the right emissary of the Blood Dragon, and Zhenhong all disguised themselves and snuck into the Blue Thunder City. They spread the news of the destruction of the Blue Thunder sect's mountain gate in places where there were many people. The news caused an uproar among the crowd. Everyone's first reaction was to refuse to believe it. They refuted and even accused Zhenhong and the others of spreading rumors. However, they spoke with great confidence and vividly described the process and scene of the destruction of the Blue Thunder sect's main gate. Moreover, they insisted that it was Hao Yan's punishment. The Blue Thunder sect angered Hao Yan and was punished by heaven. They were destroyed in an instant. Hearing those words, the people in the city found it even more ridiculous. They cursed in indignation and whispered to each other. However, the people in the city didn't believe it. However, the news spread quickly in the Blue Thunder City. Many masters rushed to the Blue Thunder sect to verify the authenticity of the news. Zhenhong and the others left the Blue Thunder City quietly after achieving their goal. Then, Ji Tianxing and the others went south to their next target. What happened next was self-evident. More than 2 hours later, many experts returned to the Blue Thunder City. The reactions of these people were more or less the same. They were all filled with shock, and their faces were deathly pale. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Many people gathered around and asked what had happened. Those experts said the answer with fear in their hearts. What those people said is true. The gate of the Blue Thunder sect was destroyed. No, the Blue Thunder sect was not destroyed. It disappeared completely. There used to be a 2,000 zhang high mountain there. Now it's a flat land. That's horrible. Everything within a radius of 1,000 miles has become a flat land. That mountain and the Green Thunder sect have disappeared. This is the punishment of heaven. To the people in the city, this news was like a bolt from the blue. Everyone was stupefied. They were shocked to the extreme, and dense fear surged out from their hearts. If only 2 or 3 experts said this, many commoners would still feel lucky and unwilling to believe or accept this fact. However, everyone who went to check on the situation gave the same answer. This caused all the citizens in the city to no longer have any doubts. The Green Thunder sect was indeed gone. It was destroyed by the divine punishment. Soon, the city lord's mansion also received the exact news. The city lord went there in person. After checking the situation, he hurriedly sent a message to the master of the Blue Thunder sect to report the situation. Thousands of miles away from the Thundersound mountain range, a team of several hundred people was flying in the sky. The master of the Blue Thunder sect, more than 10 elders, dozens of deacons, and hundreds of disciples had drawn a battle line that was thousands of miles long in the sky. They flew south unhurriedly. They were waiting for half a month to close the encirclement and complete the task that Prince Lian had given them. At this moment, a message jade slip flew from the sky and landed in front of the master of the Blue Thunder sect. This person was a tall and burly middle-aged deity in a golden robe. There was a thunderbolt mark on his forehead. His aura was very majestic and overbearing. He reached out and grabbed the jade slip. His divine senses entered it and read the message inside. After 2 breaths, his face suddenly stiffened. His body shook violently, and his eyes widened in horror. He froze in the sky as if he had been petrified. His expression became extremely horrified and incredulous. The sudden change made the elders realize something was wrong. They hurriedly gathered around and asked about the situation. Sect Master, what happened? Who sent the message? Could it be that the little prince has new instructions? Sect Master, what's wrong with you? Why do you look so pale? The elders asked one after another with concerned looks on their faces. The master of the Blue Thunder sect was stunned for a long time before he came to his senses. His lips trembled as he said, "Our sect's mountain gate is gone." It was only a few words, but it seemed that he had used up the last of his strength. His voice was trembling and hoarse. The elders were also stunned. Their faces changed color, and they cried out in alarm. What? The mountain gate is gone. How is this possible? How could it be gone all of a sudden? What's going on? Did someone attack our sect? The master of the Blue Thunder sect roared with a pale face. News came from Blue Thunder City. Our sect and the holy mountain are gone. The surrounding thousands of miles have become flat ground. The deputy sect master and more than 2,000 disciples are all gone. Not even a corpse is left. The news in the city is that our sect angered Hao Ian and was punished by the heavens. After roaring, the master of the Blue Thunder sect was so angry that he could not bear it anymore. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Puff! The purplish-red blood sword flew far away. It was a shocking sight. The elders were all stunned, and the mighty procession also stopped. The news of the mountain gate being destroyed quickly spread among the crowd. Hundreds of disciples were stunned. There was a commotion in the crowd. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Everyone's expression was also mournful. All their fighting spirit had disappeared. The blow was so great that everyone was stunned. Many disciples wailed. Many deacons beat their chests and stamped their feet. The crowd was in chaos. The elders and the master of the Blue Thunder sect were the first to calm down. Someone roared, "What kind of heavenly punishment is this? I don't believe in such nonsense." Someone immediately echoed, "Yes, our sect has always been law-abiding. How could we be punished by the heavens? The enemy must have attacked our sect. The people are stupid and ignorant. That's why they thought of the heavenly punishment." Sect Master, this is definitely not a heavenly punishment. It must be done by our enemy. The master of the Blue Thunder sect nodded in agreement. He frowned and analyzed. Our sect has many enemies, but only a few of them. With the strength of those sects, it is impossible for them to break into our mountain gate and kill more than 2,000 people in one breath. They also made the sacred mountain disappear in an instant and flattened the land within 1,000 miles. It is definitely not done by those sects. The elders nodded and began to discuss and analyze. Those sects know that we work for Prince Lien. They will not dare to attack us. But other than those sects, we don't have any other enemies. Suddenly, an elder's eyes flashed as he thought of a possibility. Do you think it is possible that Tianxing did it? After all, that kid destroyed the sacred fire sect and the surging waves palace in the god-burying mountain range. He is probably the only one who has such terrifying strength and means. Chapter 31-37. Everyone was stunned when they heard the name Tianxing. After a moment of silence, the faction master of the Green Thunder faction and the other elders finally spoke. Fifth Elder's analysis makes sense. Apart from the other factions, our most powerful enemy is Tianxing. Only that bastard would have such terrifying strength. We have no quarrel with him. How could he be so vicious to do such an outrageous thing? No, although we haven't fought with him yet, we are working for the prince. We will join forces to kill him. That's right, we are working for the prince. That means we are his mortal enemies. That bastard is cunning and sinister. He must have known about the prince's plan. If he refuses to surrender, he will take the initiative to destroy all 8 of our factions. After the elders' analysis, everyone was even more certain that Ji Tianxing was the culprit behind this tragedy. Suddenly, the faction master of the Green Thunder faction added, "Don't forget that we have just received news that the main force of the Flying Cloud faction has been annihilated. Even that old bastard Nie Feiyun was killed by Tianxing. In conclusion, I think Tianxing is the culprit." The faction master of the Green Thunder faction concluded that the culprit was the culprit. The elders were furious. They gritted their teeth and started to curse. Tianxing, that son of a bitch. Our faction will never forgive him. That son of a bitch destroyed our faction's foundation and killed more than 2,000 of our disciples. Such a blood feud. Even if we were to be smashed to pieces, we would still repay in double. That son of a bitch is too vicious. Not only did he destroy our faction, but he also spread the rumor that this is a punishment from heaven. He is trying to destroy our faction's reputation. Faction Master, that bastard must still be around. Let's go back and fight him to the death. Seeing that the elders were filled with righteous indignation, it was as if they were ready to die. The faction master of the Green Thunder faction quickly advised, "Everyone, please calm down. Don't forget the prince's warning. He told us not to act rashly. If all 8 of our factions work together, we might be able to kill Tianxing. However, if any of our sects were to encounter him, we would only be slaughtered. If you all rush back to the sect now, if you really meet him, you will only be killed by him." The elders fell silent. A younger and hot-blooded elder roared with red eyes. "Then should we just pretend that nothing happened and not avenge our disciples?" The master of the Blue Thunder sect waved his hand and said in a dignified tone, "The tragedy has already happened. It's useless to be angry. Now, we have to consider clearly what we should do next. Continue the mission and join forces with the 7 major sects to kill Tianxing? Or should we retreat in the face of difficulties and rush back to Blue Thunder City to clean up the mess and stabilize the people's hearts?" The elders were silent. After a moment of deliberation, they gave their own opinions. "This old man believes that Tianxing destroyed our sect's mountain gate in order to intimidate and warn us. If we continue to participate in the mission, he will definitely kill us all. This isn't a threat or a warning. This is a declaration of war. After all, our sect is destroyed and we have no home to return to. Let's continue the mission and kill him in one go. Only in this way can we be rewarded by the young lord and avenge our dead disciples. No, the Blue Thunder City and the Thunderous Sound Mountain are our foundations. Now that the news has spread, the Thunderous Sound Mountain will definitely be in chaos. We can't abandon the foundation that we have built for thousands of years. We have to rush back to take charge of the situation and rebuild the sect. If we withdraw from the mission directly, we will offend the young lord. I suggest that you send a message to the young lord to report the situation and then return to the Thunderous Sound Mountain to clean up the mess. In this way, we can withdraw from the mission without offending the young lord." Obviously, the destruction of the sect's mountain gate had caused great panic among the elders. They were so scared of Tianxing that they didn't dare to participate in the mission anymore. Among the elders, only 2 of them supported continuing the mission and vowed to kill Tianxing. The others all wanted to withdraw. They advised the master of the Blue Thunder sect to withdraw from the mission and return to the Thunderous Sound Mountain to recuperate. Therefore, after careful consideration, the master of the Blue Thunder sect made a decision. "I will send a message to the young lord right now and tell him everything in detail. Then, we will return to the Thunderous Sound Mountain to clean up the mess and wait for any changes. I believe that Tianxing won't just target our sect. He will definitely attack other sects next." Since the master of the Blue Thunder sect had made the decision, the elders had no objections. They could only follow the order. In the royal city of Wrath, in the same golden palace, in the secret chamber filled with divine power, Prince Lien was still sitting in the pool of divine liquid, surrounded by divine light. He was healing himself with his eyes closed. At this moment, the door of the secret chamber lit up and made some noises. Prince Lien frowned and stopped healing himself. He waved his hand and opened the door of the secret chamber. The Lien heir in golden armor entered the secret chamber quickly with his head lowered. He knelt down in front of the pool of divine liquid. Prince Lien's heart skipped a beat when he saw the embarrassed look on the Lien heir's face. He had a bad feeling. "Lien heir, what happened?" The Lien heir didn't dare to hide anything. He handed a jade slip to Prince Lien. "Your Highness, the master of the Blue Thunder sect just sent an urgent message. He said that the Blue Thunder sect has been razed to the ground." "What?" Prince Lien's body stiffened, and his expression became very awkward. He quickly took the communication jade slip and read its contents with his divine sense. There was a lot of information in the jade slip, but he finished reading it quickly. Crack! Prince Lien's face twisted in anger. He crushed the jade slip. Punishment of Haotian? Punishment of Haotian? Ha ha! Ha ha! What a punishment of Haotian! Prince Lien was so angry that he started to laugh. He cursed in a gloomy voice. Tianxing is a bastard. Damn bastard. He was afraid of this king's inescapable net, so he actually used such a vicious scheme and did such a cruel and vicious thing. But it worked so well that the Blue Thunder sect was scared out of their wits. They want to quit the mission and go back to the Thunder Sound Mountain to clean up the mess. The Lien heir knelt on the ground. He was terrified. He said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, the Flying Cloud sect has been destroyed. If the Blue Thunder sect quit the mission, there will be a big gap in our encirclement. Moreover, with the strength of the 7 sects, they are not completely confident that they can kill Tianxing." Prince Lien nodded and said in a low voice, "It's not that simple. If that bastard can attack the Blue Thunder sect, he can also attack the Flying Rainbow sect, the Overlord Pavilion, but the elites and main forces of the sects are all carrying out my mission. Their sects and headquarters are empty. If Tianxing destroys their headquarters one by one, those sects will panic and quit the mission one after another. With the major sects withdrawing from the operation one after another, this king's inescapable net will collapse on its own. Tianxing, that little bastard, is really vicious." Prince Lien was shaking with anger. His eyes were bloodshot and turned dark red. Chapter 31-38. Silver Moon Lake. This is a huge lake with a radius of 100,000 miles, located between the mountains. If overlooking from the sky, this lake is like a silver moon on the earth. The geographical location of this lake is superior, and the divine power is incomparably abundant. It is a rare cultivation treasure land. The Mystic Moon sect, which has been passed down for more than 8,000 years, is located in this lake. Moreover, what is surprising and admirable is that the headquarters of the Mystic Moon sect is actually at the bottom of the lake. It is a beautiful underwater palace located at the bottom of the water. At the bottom of the dark water, there is a colorful light shield with a radius of 100 miles, quietly standing at the bottom of the lake. Inside the colorful light shield is the headquarters of the Mystic Moon sect. Dozens of colorful, magnificent, and solemn palaces are located among the reefs and corals. Inside the light shield, there are plazas, gardens, medicine fields, and forests. Such a scene is no different from the sects on the land. But outside the colorful light shield is the dark bottom of the water, where hundreds of millions of fish and shrimp swim in groups. There are also 9 winged dragonfish, which are thousands of feet long and have lived for tens of thousands of years, slowly swimming around the light shield. Those 9 winged dragonfish have the strength of the 5th or 6th level of the divine monarch realm, and are the guardian beasts of the Mystic Moon sect. Now, the main force and elites of the Mystic Moon sect are outside carrying out the mission of Prince Lien. Only the deputy sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect, several elders, more than 3,000 disciples, and tens of thousands of servants and odd job workers are left in the headquarters. Because of the special location of the Mystic Moon sect's headquarters, almost no one dares to come here and behave atrociously. In addition, after the Mystic Moon sect submitted to Prince Lien, its power has been rapidly strengthened, and no one dares to provoke it. Even if the headquarters' power is empty, many disciples are safe and sound, and there is no need to worry. Today, the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect are cultivating in seclusion as usual, living a peaceful life. All of a sudden, the shimmering dark lake was suddenly illuminated by a dazzling divine light. A total of 20,000 colorful giant swords poured down like a rain of arrows, covering the surface of the lake with a radius of 1,000 miles. Boom, 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 boom. 10,000 swords entered the water, carrying the power to destroy the heavens and earth, and blasted toward the sect's protective array and underwater palace. The 9 winged dragonfish surrounding the sect protection formation felt a strong aura of death and were instantly frightened. They immediately sped up and charged towards the 10,000 giant swords without any regard for their own safety, unleashing all kinds of divine abilities and secret techniques to defend themselves. Boom, boom, boom. Tens of thousands of giant swords collided with the divine light that blotted out the sky, causing a deafening explosion. The abygina that blotted out the sky was immediately shattered into pieces. The 9-winged dragonfish were also cut into pieces by the thousands of giant swords. A large amount of blood splashed into the lake, dyeing the area within a radius of 100 miles red. The corpses of the winged dragonfish were also scattered in all directions. Their godheads flew out and fled in all directions in a panic. Although they had protected the mystic moon sect for thousands of years, in the face of death, it was their nature to flee. Unfortunately, the area within a radius of 500 kilometers had been sealed off by tens of thousands of swords. It was impossible for them to escape. Ka-ka-ka. Following a series of crisp cracking sounds, the godheads of the 9-winged dragonfish were all shattered by the giant sword. Immediately after, 20,000 giant swords fell to the bottom of the lake and slammed into the sect protection formation. Another loud, rumbling sound could be heard, spreading hundreds of miles under the lake. The multicolored sect protecting Grand Formation was shattered on the spot, and hundreds of millions of fragments flew out. The destructive shockwave created a huge wave that was hundreds of feet tall, causing chaos within a radius of 500 kilometers. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The heaven-destroying sword formation was immediately formed and sealed off the headquarters of the Mystic Moon sect. The sword formation was activated, and tens of thousands of swords flew back and forth, forming a dazzling sword net. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were suddenly awakened, and all of them fled in panic, screaming and yelling. However, the screams of countless disciples, servants were quickly drowned out by the earth-shattering sound. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, the magnificent palaces were shattered by the giant swords, turning into debris and ruins. Countless disciples and servants of the Mystic Moon sect were also shattered into pieces by the sword light and scattered at the bottom of the lake. The lake water in this area became extremely murky, filled with blood and debris. The sword formation continued to operate for 10 breaths of time. The earth-shattering sound also lasted for a long time before it dissipated. When the heaven-destroying sword formation was removed and the 20,000 giant swords dissipated, the area gradually returned to calm. The sect protection formation of 100 miles was gone. Dozens of palaces and houses also disappeared without a trace. The magnificent underwater castle had also been reduced to rubble. The headquarters of the Mystic Moon sect no longer existed. More than 10,000 people of the God Clan were also killed on the spot, and not even a complete corpse was left. Not long after, Lin Shui, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and Zhen Hong appeared in the ruins. They were searching for spoils at the bottom of the lake and cleaning up the battlefield. Soon, Lin Shui found a treasure vault buried deep in the ground, located in the rock layer. Ji Tianxing used a little trick to break the sect protection formation of the treasure vault. Then, Lin Shui, Gold Left Emissary, and the others entered the treasure vault and plundered the treasures. An hour later, they had seized more than 30 billion worth of resources. Only then did they leave in satisfaction. Not long after, the news of the Mystic Moon sect's headquarters being destroyed also spread quickly. Experts and powerhouses from all directions went to the Silver Moon Lake to check the situation. The news of the Mystic Moon sect's destruction was confirmed and set off another shocking storm, making billions of God Clan members tremble in fear. 5 days later, another explosive news came from Tianyi County's Flying Rainbow City. 100,000 miles away from Flying Rainbow City, the Flying Rainbow sect, located on the Dragon Vein treasure land, was also destroyed in an instant. The Flying Rainbow sect was located in the Sea of Clouds, above the abyss between two 10,000 feet high peaks. It had always been a sacred and ethereal cultivation ground. But when countless experts heard the news and rushed over, they found that the flying rainbow sect had disappeared. Even the two 10,000 feet high peaks and hundreds of miles of sea of clouds no longer existed. According to the news circulating in the city, the flying rainbow sect's outcome was the same as the blue thunder sect, also suffering the wrath of heaven. Great heaven sent down 10,000 divine giant swords, destroying everything in the blink of an eye, killing all living things. This news caused another huge uproar in Tianyi County, causing countless God clan members to panic. As the saying went, before one wave subsided, another wave arose. Another 7 days later, the Overlord Pavilion located in the Three Dragons County was also punished by Great Heaven. Under the bombardment of 10,000 swords, they disappeared without a trace, leaving no survivors. The process and scene of the Overlord Pavilion's destruction was exactly the same as the Flying Rainbow sect and the Blue Thunder sect. When the news spread throughout the God Nation, countless people and experts felt that something was wrong. How was this some kind of heavenly punishment? It was clear that there was an incomparably powerful deity enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens, eradicating evil. At the same time, Prince Lien, who was still recuperating in the Raging Flame Royal City, was so angry that he vomited blood again when he heard the news of the major sects being destroyed. Because the result was just as he expected. The major sects that had been destroyed all lost their fighting spirit and expressed that they would withdraw from the operation. Chapter 31-39. Bastard, that damn beast. Even if I cut him into 1,000 pieces, it would not be enough to appease the hatred in my heart. In the Raging Flame Royal City, Prince Lien angrily roared in the secret chamber of the palace. He stood in the middle of the divine liquid pool, his whole body burning with blood-red flames. The pool water was boiling and evaporating, creating a vast mist. On the ground, 1 zhang away from him, was a pile of broken jade slips. On the ground, 2 zhang away, the Lien heir was kneeling on one knee with his head buried deep, trembling with fear. Just a moment ago, the Lien heir had sent a message from the Overlord Pavilion's master. In the message, the Overlord Pavilion's master said that the headquarters had been destroyed and more than 2,000 disciples had been killed, which was a devastating blow to the Overlord Pavilion. Now, the Overlord Pavilion's master and more than 400 of his elites had lost their fighting spirit and fighting spirit. In desperation, the Overlord Pavilion could only temporarily withdraw from the operation and return to the headquarters to clean up the mess and recuperate. Prince Lien's mission was indeed important, but the headquarters of the Overlord Pavilion had been operating for more than 10,000 years could not be lost. Although the Overlord Pavilion's master had tactfully proposed his idea and repeatedly apologized to Prince Lien, the truth was right in front of him. No matter how tactful he was, it was useless. Prince Lien was so angry that his whole body trembled and he almost vomited blood. There was no other way. This was already the 5th time he had received such news. A total of 5 sects had been attacked by Ji Tianxing, and their headquarters and gates had been destroyed. The result was the same. The 5 sects were scared out of their wits and did not dare to participate in the encirclement mission. They hurriedly rushed back to the headquarters to clean up the mess. This was because the headquarters had many disciples' families and many emotional ties. Moreover, each sect understood that this was a threat and warning from Tianxing. If they continued to participate in the mission, the next time it would not be the old and weak from the headquarters that would be slaughtered, but their elites. If Ji Tianxing could sneak attack the headquarters of each sect, then he could also intercept and kill the main force of each sect. In other words, the life and death of each sect was in the hands of Ji Tianxing. The headquarters and gates of the 5 sects have been destroyed by that bastard. Right now, only the Spirit Sword sect, the Divine Saber Union, and the 10,000 Streams sect have not been attacked. 5 sects have withdrawn from the operation, leaving only the 3 sections. Can they still encircle that bastard Tianxing? Grand Prince Lien roared in a hoarse voice. His entire body was filled with fierce flames, and his eyes were dark red. At this time, the Lien heir said with a trembling voice, "Your Highness, just now, the The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect also sent a message. When Prince Lien heard this, he immediately grinned coldly and said, "What? The Spirit Sword sect hasn't been attacked by that beast yet. Are they going to withdraw from the operation?" The Lien heir lowered his head even more and said in a trembling voice, "Your Highness, please understand. Although the Spirit Sword sect has not been attacked, the headquarters of the other 5 sects have been destroyed. From Tianqing's action plan, the next target was the Spirit Sword sect, the 10,000 Flow sect, and the Divine Blade Union. Therefore, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect has expressed his intention to lead the elites back to the headquarters to guard against Tianqing's attack. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect has said that if Tianqing really attacks the headquarters of the Spirit Sword sect, he will destroy both the Jade and the Common Stone. Even if he has to sacrifice everyone in the Spirit Sword sect, including himself, he will do his utmost to kill Tianqing, so as to not disappoint your Highness." Ha ha ha! Grand Prince Lien immediately laughed and sneered contemptuously. These bastards, do they really think that this king is confused by anger? Isn't he just greedy for life and afraid of death, wanting to preserve the foundation of the Spirit Sword sect? Why do they have to make it sound so dignified? If Tianqing really attacks the Spirit Sword sect, why would he fight to the death? I'm afraid he would run faster than anyone else. The Lien heir remained silent, not daring to answer. Grand Prince Lien sneered for a while, then waved his hand dispiritedly. Forget it, forget it. The 5 sects have already withdrawn, and the Spirit Sword sect also wants to escape. This king's inescapable dragnet plan has already failed. Even if I order the Spirit Sword sect to stay, what's the point? On the contrary, this king will end up with a reputation of being harsh and ungrateful, not caring about the life and death of my subordinates. If the Spirit Sword sect wants to be a coward, then let them be." The Lien heir immediately kowtowed and said with a sonorous voice, "Your Highness is wise. This subordinate will pass the message that the Spirit Sword sect is allowed to temporarily withdraw from the operation." With that, the Lien heir bowed and prepared to leave the secret room. However, at this moment, a flash of light flew out from the passage and landed in front of the Lien heir. The Lien heir grabbed the jade slip and quickly used his divine sense to examine it. Suddenly, his complexion changed, revealing a deeply aghast expression. Seeing his reaction, Grand Prince Lien immediately frowned and asked in a deep voice, "What happened?" The Lien heir swallowed hard and said with a trembling voice, "Reporting to your Highness. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect just sent a message. Just now, the headquarters of the Spirit Sword sect was attacked. The vice sect leader, several elders, many deacons, and more than 2,000 disciples were all turned into ashes. Even the main gate of the Spirit Sword sect was razed to the ground, turning into ruins in the blink of an eye. The process of Tianqing attacking the Spirit Sword sect was no different from before. It was still bombarded by 10,000 swords. Moreover, the news and rumors that Tianqing released were the same as before, saying that the Spirit Sword sect was also punished by the heavens. Grand Prince Lien suddenly became silent. His body stiffened and stood in a daze. After a long time, he gradually came back to his senses. With a mocking sneer, he said, "Ha ha, aren't those bastards of the Spirit Sword sect greedy for life and afraid of death?" But it turns out that they were still one step too late. Even if this king had just approved and allowed them to return to their sect, they still couldn't avoid the disaster of their sect being exterminated. The Lien heir could only remain silent, not daring to express any opinion. Grand Prince Lien pondered for a moment, and then suddenly thought of something. With a dignified tone, he said, "Lien heir, I want you to draft a decree and convey this king's decree to the 5 great sects and the Spirit Sword sect. In any case, their sects have been destroyed, their foundation and wealth no longer exist. It can be said that they have nothing left. Since this is the case, they and Tianqing are irreconcilable enemies, so they should unite against a common enemy. We have to work together to kill that bastard Tianqing. That's the only way we can get our revenge. Tell the people of the 6 great sects that if they immediately respond to this king's order, then everything will be forgotten. But if they dare to delay, then don't blame this king for pacifying the internal situation first. The Lion-heir understood what he meant. He quickly complied, and then left the secret room to send out the message. The secret room was restored to silence. Grand Prince Lien's complexion became malicious, and his eyes revealed a resentful light. "Damn little bastard, do you think you can still stir up a storm in the raging flame divine country?" As the saying goes, an army filled with righteous indignation is bound to win. The elites and main forces of the 8 great sects will definitely fight you to the last drop of blood. However, how could that little bastard know the locations of the sects so clearly? That Nye Feiyun, is he dead or not? Could it be that he betrayed us and surrendered and became Tianqing's spy? Chapter 3140. The moon was dark and the wind was howling. In the falling Sword Mountain range of the Cambrian County, a group of more than 400 people majestically flew across the sky. After a short while, this majestic group stopped in the air above a plain. The crowd was very quiet. Everyone looked solemn, sorrowful, and dignified. Everyone looked at the plain in the night. Their expression was full of grief, indignation, and hatred. This was because this 800-mile-wide plain was originally a stretch of towering mountain peaks and valleys. On top of the 2,000 feet high mountain, there were countless palaces and buildings. That was where the Spirit Sword sect was located. But now, everything was wiped out. The mountain and the ravine no longer existed. More than 2,000 disciples also turned into ashes. Not even a whole corpse was left. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect rushed back with more than 400 elders, deacons, and elite disciples, only to see such a miserable scene. How could they not be angry and desperate? A heavy and solemn atmosphere pervaded the crowd. In the hearts of more than 400 people, there was a thick resentment and killing intent accumulated. At this time, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect loudly said, "It took 8,000 years for our sect to develop to its current scale. But now, that beast Tianqing is so cruel and vicious that he actually destroyed our sect's foundation and slaughtered more than 2,000 disciples. Such a blood feud is absolutely irreconcilable in this life." The more than 400 elite disciples all loudly shouted, "Absolutely irreconcilable! Absolutely irreconcilable!" The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect raised his hand and pressed it down, signaling the crowd to be quiet. He then said in a heavy tone, "However, we must remember this enmity in our hearts. For the time being, we cannot retaliate. The top priority is to immediately rush to the Eternal Night City, where half of our sect's foundation and painstaking efforts are." The ordinary disciples didn't quite understand the meaning of this sentence, but many of the elders and deacons understood the meaning of the sect leader. Many years ago, the sect leader had prepared for a rainy day and made a plan in advance. On the surface, the Spirit Sword sect only had this one headquarters. But in fact, the Spirit Sword sect had built a treasure house in the Eternal Night City, which stored a massive amount of cultivation resources and treasures. The so-called eggs cannot be put in one basket. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect had long understood this truth. He also had reason to believe that although Ji Tianqing could destroy the Spirit Sword sect, it was impossible for him to know the location of the treasure house. So what if more than 2,000 disciples died? As long as that treasury still exists, our sect still has a chance to rise again. This was the inner thought of the Spirit Sword sect's sect leader. Soon, he left the battlefield ruins with more than 400 elders, deacons, and elite disciples, and rushed to Everlasting Night City as fast as lightning. After continuously rushing for 4 hours, everyone finally arrived at Eternal Night City. This ancient city with thousands of years of history was still brightly lit even in the middle of the night. In the entire Cambrian County, Evernight City was one of the top few cities with a large population. However, the treasure house of the Spirit Sword sect was not in the city. Instead, it was 1,000 miles south of the city, in an inconspicuous, dilapidated villa. The dilapidated villa was located in the middle of the mountains. The villa occupied an area of more than 10 miles, and there was no sign of human habitation on normal days. However, in the dark, there were hundreds of elite experts lying in ambush all over the villa, guarding the safety of the treasure house day and night. As for the treasure house, of course, it was under the ground of the villa in the belly of the mountain. The treasure house was protected by a powerful divine array, which not only concealed its divine power, but also made it difficult to be discovered. Whoosh, whoosh, a dazzling divine light flashed, and the more than 400 people of the Spirit Sword sect arrived in the sky above the villa. In the past, the people in the villa should have been alarmed. Immediately, a guard flew out, saluted the sect leader and the others, and reported the defense situation. However, tonight, the villa was dead silent. Not only no guard appeared, but there was also no sound. Such a strange scene caused the sect leader and several elders of the Spirit Sword sect to frown with vigilance. After hesitating for a moment, several elders began to discuss. Sect leader, this old man feels that something is wrong with this villa. According to the past practice, the guard captain and the housekeeper have already found out that we are coming, so they must come out to greet us. Sect leader, the villa looks so strange. Should we investigate the situation first? I have a bad premonition that this villa has been occupied. What? How could that kid know about this place? Damn it. In this villa, half of our sect's life's work is buried. The great defensive array of the villa seems to have been tampered with. We can't even detect the situation in the villa. No matter what the truth is, everyone should be careful. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect quickly made up his mind. He took out his divine weapons and quietly landed in the mountain villa with more than 400 elites. Before the crowd could shout, there was no time to release their divine sense to investigate the situation in the villa. Suddenly, a 20 miles wide, 5-color divine array appeared out of thin air in the night sky. Whoosh! The 5-colored light cover shrouded the entire villa, emitting a dazzling brilliance. The more than 400 people of the Spirit Sword sect were all blocked by the 5-colored light cover, so they had no way to retreat. At this time, the 5-colored light cover suddenly condensed into thousands of giant swords. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Thousands of giant divine swords immediately shot out like a rain of arrows, producing a sharp and ear-piercing sound. Facing this sudden change, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect immediately realized that something was wrong. He shouted himself hoarse, "We have been ambushed. Everyone, defend with all your strength. Don't panic." The more than 400 disciples were indeed elites. No matter how panicked they were, they could still remain calm. Everyone quickly formed a battle array and went all out to resist the bombardment of the sword rain. Boom, 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 boom. Bang, 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 bang. The sky-covering divine light and shadow collided with the giant swords, producing a deafening sound. Countless divine light and shadow collapsed, but the thousands of giant swords were unscathed. Moreover, their power was still strong. They formed a hurricane in the villa, and scrupulously sweeping across the area. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, wherever the storm of swords passed, all the palaces and houses were twisted into slag, turning into ruins. The palaces and houses protected by the divine array still ended up like this. The fate of the more than 400 disciples of the Spirit Sword sect was self-evident. Sword light burst out in the field. The divine light was dazzling, and screams were heard everywhere. Countless arrows of blood, broken limbs, and minced meat fiercely burst out. In just a few breaths, more than 100 disciples of the Spirit Sword sect died under the thousands of swords. But this was just the beginning. With the passage of time, the number of disciples of the Spirit Sword sect continued to decrease. The sect leader and several elders of the Spirit Sword sect also tried their best to hold on. Their bodies were covered with wounds and stained with blood. This was not a confrontation between two armies, but a one-sided massacre. The disciples of the Spirit Sword sect didn't even see who the enemy was before they were strangled into a mess. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3141. Soon, 100 breaths of time had passed. The five-colored sword array that blotted out the sky actually stopped operating. And at this time, more than 400 Sky God Realm elite disciples had already been killed. Even several elders had been beheaded, leaving only 5 people alive. The 5 elders and 12 deacons surrounded the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, their hearts filled with fear. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect could only remain calm. He roared in a low voice, "Tianxing, even if this lord has never met you, this lord has already guessed that this is your doing. Apart from you, no one else has this kind of courage and means. Now that the Spirit Sword sect has been destroyed, we only have a few seedlings left. I hope you can let us go. Rest assured, as long as you spare us, we swear that we will never go against you again." The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was thoroughly terrified. He no longer dared to boast, and his tone also eased a lot. Even though the Spirit Sword sect had suffered such a heavy loss, the sect leader did not dare to show any resentment or hatred. Above the ruined mountain villa, a young man's voice sounded, crisp and efficient, full of powerful, domineering aura. "Before this lord has already given you a chance. However, you didn't cherish it, and even wanted to be Prince Lian's accomplice, still thinking about this treasure house. Since that's the case, don't blame this lord for being ruthless." There was no doubt that this was Ji Tianxing's voice. His answer also announced the death of the people of the Spirit Sword sect. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was immediately filled with grief and indignation. He roared in a low voice, "Kid, how can you be so vicious, killing us all in one fell swoop? Even though we work for Prince Lian, we haven't had any conflicts with you until now." As the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, he was usually very high-profile and dignified. At that moment, it was already very difficult for him to be able to say such lowly words in front of so many people. But unfortunately, Ji Tianxing was unmoved. He coldly replied, "Don't talk so much nonsense. Since you chose to follow Prince Lian, you must bear the consequences." As his voice fell, the divine sword rain that blotted out the sky once again poured down in torrents. Rumble, bang, 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 bang. A deafening explosion erupted in the sky, resounding through the clouds. The powerhouses of the Spirit Sword sect desperately unleashed their magical abilities in a futile attempt to resist the bombardment of the divine punishment. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. Everyone's divine abilities were immediately torn to shreds by the giant sword. However, the power of the divine greatsword didn't diminish as it pierced through a dozen elders and deacons. In an instant, blood splattered within the sword formation again, and screams rose and fell one after another. In just 10 breaths of time, all the elders and deacons were dead. Only the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was still alive, but he was also covered in blood and bruises. His long hair was disheveled, and the long robe he wore had turned into rags. His arms, legs, and chest were all marked with chopstick-sized marks. Even his internal organs were clearly visible. "Oh, you vicious beast! I'll fight you to the death." At this point, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect had to accept his fate. He knew that Ji Tianxing wouldn't let him off, and that today he would die without a doubt. However, even if he died here, he would drag Ji Tianxing down with him. Thus, he roused his life's divine power and brazenly launched a self-detonation. Huff! Huff, huff! Suddenly, the sect leader's divine body violently swelled up, flashing with dazzling divine light. An aura that could destroy heaven and earth was released from his body. At this time, Ji Tianxing's voice sounded in the night sky. "Now you're determined to self-detonate. Don't you think it's too late?" As he spoke, a huge palm the size of a palace descended from the night sky, ruthlessly slapping toward the sect leader. While dodging, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect laughed like a madman. "Ha ha! Are you finally afraid? Even if my death is insignificant, don't think you'll have an easy time. Even if I don't kill you, I'll make you seriously injured." After all, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect was an 8th-stage monarch god, and his strength was very profound. He had enough confidence that even if he couldn't kill Ji Tianxing, he would still seriously injure him. However, The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect didn't understand Ji Tianqing at all. The huge palm that descended from the sky instantly turned into a sword finger, and with a speed faster than the aurora, it ruthlessly stabbed the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect. Bang! Along with a crisp, muffled sound, the shining golden sword finger pierced the Spirit Sword sect's sect leader. An even stranger scene appeared. The body of the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect, like a deflated balloon, instantly became shriveled. Immediately afterward, his body quickly weathered, bursting into hundreds of millions of fragments. The sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect's self-detonation was rudely interrupted by Ji Tianqing. Not only was his self-detonation destroyed, his body collapsed and shattered. Even his fighting spirit and fighting spirit were crushed to the point that not a single drop was left. Swoosh! A dazzling five-colored godhead flew across the sky like a stream of light, fleeing toward the gap in the sword array. However, Ji Tianqing's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He directly flicked his finger and shot out two rays of sword light, which hit the godhead first. Kacha! With a crisp cracking sound, the sect leader of the Spirit Sword sect's godhead was shattered. A dignified 8th-stage, high divine monarch had fallen just like that, died in obscurity. The battle was finally over. The divine light and storm that pervaded between heaven and earth had also gradually weakened a lot. The mountain villa, with a radius of more than 10 miles, had long been leveled to the ground. Not even a single piece of intact brick was left. Ji Tianqing began to clean up the battlefield, searching for the fragments of the godheads of the sect leader and several elders. At this time, Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others swarmed to Ji Tianqing's side. Everyone's mood was very excited, and their expressions were full of complacency. Haha, fortunately, we came 2 hours early. Otherwise, where would we find the treasury? I really didn't expect this. The Spirit Sword sect's secret treasury here actually stored tens of billions of cultivation resources. This time, we really made a big profit. There was no doubt that Lin Shui, Zhan Hong, and the others had already searched the underground treasury long before the sect leader and the 400 disciples of the Spirit Sword sect arrived. The cultivation resources stored in the treasury had been divided up by everyone. After solving the matter of the treasury, everyone hid in the town and rested for a while. When the sect leader and the several hundred disciples of the Spirit Sword sect came over aggressively, everyone waited at ease and quickly settled the matter. From this moment on, the Spirit Sword sect no longer existed. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and removed the sword array. Then, he quickly left the ruins with Lin Shui, Zhen Hong, and the others. The 7 major sects have already received their due punishment. Now, only the Divine Blade Union and the Thousand Flow sect are left. Although Nye Fiyun has marked on the map that the Divine Blade Union and the Thousand Flow sect have branches and treasury. However, we only need to defeat the people of the 2 major sects to have a deterrent effect. While flying, Ji Tianqing silently calculated the next plan. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 3142. 5 days later, the news of the annihilation of the Spirit Sword sect spread in the raging flame divine country. Countless sects and forces got the news from various channels and knew that the murderer was Tianqing from the bloody flame divine country. Not only that, but there were also all kinds of rumors in the divine country. The several major sects that had been destroyed by the divine punishment were actually destroyed by Tianqing. This person was extremely vicious and had entered the raging flame divine country with boundless murderous intent to stir up a reign of terror and kill all the major sects and forces. All kinds of rumors and news quickly spread in the raging flame divine country. For a time, all the sects and forces in the divine country were talking about Ji Tianqing. The people from these sects and forces had never seen Ji Tianqing before. They had only heard of his glorious battle achievements. Everyone described him as a 3-headed, 6-armed, ferocious-looking demon of slaughter. As a result, countless people hated him and feared him greatly. For a long time, the sects and forces of the raging flame divine country would turn pale when they talked about Tianqing. In short, Ji Tianxing was thoroughly famous in the raging flame divine country. Although he had a bad reputation, it could be said that his name had spread throughout the divine country, overshadowing countless powerhouses. It was said that even the royal family of the raging flame divine country was paying attention to him. The royal family expressed their anger and condemnation for his actions in massacring in the raging flame divine country. They advised him to surrender as soon as possible and accept the punishment of the royal family. Otherwise, the royal family would dispatch the imperial army and the Raging Flame Corps to arrest him according to the laws of the Raging Flame Divine Country. When this news spread, the people of the Raging Flame Divine Country, as well as the major sects and forces, cheered and applauded, expressing their support. Moreover, those sects that were trembling with fear and thought that Tianxing might visit them were looking forward to the king giving the order to kill Tianxing as soon as possible. Cloud Sun County. In the prosperous and affluent Cloud Sun City, in an inconspicuous house, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the others were sitting in a secret underground room, whispering. At this time, the stone door of the secret room opened. Sir Godblood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and Right Emissary Blood Dragon entered the secret room one after another. Everyone saluted Ji Tianxing and Shui Lin. After greeting them, they reported, "Young master, we've walked around the city a few times. As expected, we've heard a lot of news. Young master, the news of the destruction of the Spirit Sword sect has spread. Moreover, the destruction of the previous sects has also aroused the discussion of the common people of the God Country. Young master, you have already become a celebrity in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. It can be said that everyone knows about you. When we walked on the streets, we could hear the God race talking about your deeds. It was obvious that Sir Godblood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and Shui Long were looking for information in the city." Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Just as I expected. What other news is there? How did the outside world talk about this monarch? Report everything as it is." Hence, Sir Godblood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and the other two reported the news that they had heard truthfully. After Ji Tianxing listened, the sneer on his face deepened. "Ha ha! This is clearly the news released by that bastard Prince Lien. He spread rumors to slander this monarch, deliberately causing panic and hostility among the major forces. As for the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom's royal family, they will also pretend to pay attention to this matter and gradually deepen the conflict with this monarch. In the end, the Raging Flame royal family will have enough reason to make a move." Hearing this, Shui Lin frowned and worriedly said, "Why would the Raging Flame royal family make a move? The common people are fooled by Prince Lien and simply don't know the truth. But the royal family should know that this is a grudge between us and Prince Lien. Why should the royal family get involved in this mess?" Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to speak, Nie Fiyun, who was standing behind him, took the initiative to explain. Sect Master Lin might not know, but the Raging Flame royal family and Prince Lien have a close relationship. If Prince Lien can deal with us, the Raging Flame royal family naturally doesn't need to make a move. But if Prince Lien is powerless, the royal family will help sooner or later. Damn it! Shui Lin frowned and cursed while gnashing her teeth. So to say, we're about to become public enemies in the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "Our previous opponents were only Prince Lien's forces and the Raging Flame royal family. But now, Prince Lien is deliberately spreading rumors to incite the various sects to join forces to deal with us. His inescapable net plan failed, so he wants to use this tactic to gather the power of countless sects to deal with us, the public enemies." The Blood Illusion God Monarch worriedly said, "Young master, we can deal with Prince Lien's forces one by one and make them tremble in fear. But if all the sects of the Divine Kingdom join forces to deal with us, I'm afraid it won't be something that can be solved by killing. The more we kill, the more the sects will fear and hate us. They will become even more united and counterattack even more crazily. That way, Prince Lien's scheme will succeed." Ji Tianxing nodded and said, "This monarch naturally understands this and is already mentally prepared. However, You don't have to worry. Those sects are just a motley crew and won't amount to much. As long as we cut off Prince Lien's wings as quickly as possible and kill him, everything will be resolved. Lin promptly nodded in agreement. Right? The most important thing right now is to cut the Gordian knot and deal with Prince Lien as quickly as possible. The Divine Blade Union's mountain gate is located 50,000 miles outside the city. Shall we act tonight? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said, "Don't worry. This monarch already sent White Dragon and Zhen Hong to scout for information. It won't be too late for us to act after they find out the Divine Blade Union situation. Right now, the entire Divine Kingdom is in an uproar. The Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect are well aware that this monarch's next target is them. How could they sit still and wait for death?" Niefiyun expressed his affirmation and said with a grave tone, "Young master is right. The Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect are among the top 7 sects of the Divine Kingdom. Not only do these 2 sects have deep foundations, but they also have branches and treasure vaults. They also have other sects as allies. Now that they have a premonition of danger, they will either think of ways to strengthen their defenses and resist with all their might, or they will huddle together for warmth or transfer their wealth and foundations. In short, they will not sit still and wait for death. They will definitely take action." Just as everyone was discussing, a spiritual light flew into the secret room and landed in front of Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! The spiritual light dissipated and a communication jade slip appeared. Ji Tianxing glanced at it and smiled. "Don't worry. White Dragon has sent back a message." After speaking, he reached out and grabbed the jade slip, using his divine sense to read the contents. After a few breaths of time, he finished reading the message in the jade slip, and his lips curled into a playful smile. In the face of a great enemy, the Divine Blade Union doesn't have much choice and can only do this. Although they are wise, their speed is still too slow. Let's go, we should move. Chapter 3143. South of Yunyang City. About 50,000 miles away, there was an endless mountain range. Hundreds of branches finally gathered in the depths of the mountains, in the most majestic mountain range, Yunyang Mountain Range. This mountain range was 30,000 feet tall and stretched for a few million miles. In Yunyang County, this was the largest dragon vein. It was also the sacred cultivation ground where divine power gathered. The Divine Saber Union, which was ranked 4th in the God Nation, was located on this dragon vein. On a gently undulating hillside, there were rows upon rows of houses and mansions. Hundreds of houses and courtyards extended all the way to the peak of the mountain. On the peak of the mountain, which was shrouded in clouds, was a flat land with a radius of 200 miles. There were countless palaces and buildings here, and they were splendid, sacred, and dignified. This was the Divine Saber Union's headquarters, which had lasted for nearly 10,000 years. In the past, this was the sacred cultivation ground of the Divine Tao, a place where countless divine races revered and worshipped. But now, the splendid palaces and buildings were still there, but the sacred and dignified aura was gone. Batch after batch of Divine Saber Union disciples boarded the divine warships under the leadership of the black-robed deacons. Everyone was filled with grief and indignation as they boarded the Divine Saber Union's divine warships and left. Not only thousands of disciples, but tens of thousands of servants and odd job workers were also taken away by the divine warships. Of course, before the disciples and servants left, they packed up their belongings and wealth. Although the sect's elders and union master did not explain the reason, they only said that it was a temporary transfer and that they were taking the disciples to another place for training. But everyone had heard the news and was well aware of the situation. They were abandoning the headquarters and escaping to another place to seek refuge. All because that evil demon, Tianxing, was about to kill his way to the Divine Saber Union. The Divine Saber Union, the 4th largest sect in the God Nation, was actually forced to such a state by a brat from another nation. This was simply a great humiliation. Therefore, when the disciples left, they were filled with grief and humiliation. Many hot-blooded disciples were thinking in their hearts, it would be best if Qianxing did not come. If he really came to the Divine Saber Union to kill, they would fight to the death. They would rather have thousands of disciples die in battle and drag Qianxing down with them. At least they would not tarnish the Divine Saber Union's reputation. In the short span of an hour, more than 10 divine warships had already taken off. The White Dragon, who had been hiding in a nearby mountain and secretly observing the situation, was getting more and more anxious. Damn it! The Divine Blade Union is a bunch of cowards who are afraid of death. They actually fled? These bastards would rather bear the humiliation and become Prince Lien's dogs. If they publicly announce that they no longer serve Prince Lien, won't Master forgive them? Bai Long also understood that no matter how much the Godly Blade Union feared his master, they would not publicly announce their separation from Prince Lien. However, since the Divine Blade Union worked for Prince Lien, they were destined to be eradicated by Master. Otherwise, the Divine Blade Union would become a sharp blade in Prince Lien's hands and take away their lives. Master, Master, please come quickly. If it was an hour later, all the cowards of the Divine Blade Union would have escaped. White Dragon muttered to himself. Zhenhong, who was hiding not far away, heard his voice and said, Young Master has his own plans and arrangements. Why are you in such a hurry? Don't make any more noise. If we are discovered, young Master will have to come and save us again. White Dragon rolled his eyes and said disdainfully, with those cowards from the Divine Blade Union, they can't even escape now. How would they dare to attack us? Just as he finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. Although the Divine Blade Union's actions are humiliating, they are wise. If you think that the leader of the Divine Blade Union is a coward, then you are gravely mistaken. Suddenly hearing this voice, White Dragon was overjoyed. He hurriedly turned around and saw a familiar figure standing 100 steps behind him. It was Ji Tianxing. In the forest behind him, Lin Shui, Sir Godblood Illusion, Left Emissary Jean, and the others were also present. White Dragon hurriedly went up to greet him. After bowing, he reported the situation. Master, the people of the Divine Blade Union have already decided to escape. Since I arrived, the Divine Blade Union's disciples have been packing up and gathering at the square. An hour ago, they started boarding the divine warships and left. Now, 15 divine warships have already left, taking away about 3,000 people. There are still a few thousand people in the Divine Blade Union who have not managed to escape. Ji Tianxing nodded slightly and asked, Other than the Divine Blade Union's disciples and servants, have you seen the Divine Blade Union's elders and leader? This White Dragon hesitated. After thinking for a long time, he shook his head and replied, I have not seen them. Perhaps I am too weak. Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted him. It is not that you are weak, but the elders and leader of the Divine Blade Union have already escaped. Not only that, they have most likely taken away the Divine Blade Union's main elite force. Those who stayed in the Divine Blade Union and boarded the divine warships to escape were just ordinary disciples and servants. The Divine Blade Union is so cunning. Are they determined to go against us? White Dragon frowned, revealing a trace of disappointment and anger. Ji Tianxing nodded and said, Although the Divine Blade Union is afraid of us, they are more afraid of Prince Lien. Or maybe they trust and rely on Prince Lien more. Maybe the Divine Blade Union's leader is still dreaming that he can make contributions through this mission and be rewarded and promoted by Prince Lien. Lin Shui was not interested in these questions. She held the demonic blade and pointed at the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate not far away. She asked, What do we do now? Do we kill those small fries or not? Ji Tianxing said calmly, Although the Divine Blade Union's main force and elites have escaped, there is no point in killing those small fries. However, we must do what we must. We must destroy the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate as a warning, before we kill the Divine Blade Union's main force. As long as the Divine Blade Union's leader announces that he is no longer on good terms with Prince Lien, they will still have a chance to live. Lin Shui was relieved. She held the demonic blade and flew towards the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate. That's more like it. Otherwise, we would have made a wasted trip. How embarrassing would that be? When she finished speaking, she had already turned into a ray of bloody light and flew above the divine blade union. Heaven's wrath blood slash. She held the demonic blade with both hands. Her whole body emitted a bloody light that shot up to the sky. She used the momentum of splitting the heavens and earth to slash out a giant bloody blade that was thousands of feet long. Suddenly, the entire divine blade union was enveloped in a dazzling bloody light. Kaboom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, the divine blade union's protective array was activated. A 5-colored light barrier with a radius of 200 miles blocked the giant bloody blade. The bloody blade collapsed and exploded into thousands of bloody light fragments. The 5-colored light barrier was also trembling nonstop and emitted a strong divine power fluctuation. Such a huge commotion immediately alarmed thousands of disciples, servants, and odd job workers. Countless people lost their heads out of fear and screamed in anger and fear. Chapter 31:44. There were still more than 1,000 disciples remaining in the mountain gate. There were still more than 3,000 guards, servants, and servants. Close to 20 divine warships were also docked in the air above the spacious square, waiting for everyone to enter. However, the sudden attack disrupted everyone's escape plan. Countless disciples, servants, and odd job workers fled and hid in a panic. The 20 or so deacons were still able to maintain their calm and composure. They were already mentally prepared and knew that Ji Tianxing would attack the mountain gate. At the critical moment, they stepped forward bravely and shouted in a dignified tone. Soon, these deacons led a large group of guards and disciples to the various nodes of the protective array and worked together to support the array. More than 1,000 heaven god guards and disciples channeled their divine power to increase the power of the protective array by several times. Swoosh! Dazzling divine light flashed as the protective array was activated to its maximum. Lin Shui brandished her demon blade crazily and used more than 20 blade techniques in a row, slashing out hundreds of times. As a result, the great sect protection formation rumbled from the slashes and shook incessantly. There were even cracks in the array. However, those cracks quickly healed and the array was not broken. The disciples and servants of the Divine Blade Union were relieved when they saw that the array was so sturdy. However, Ji Tianxing arrived with Shui Huan, left Emissary Jin, and Blood Dragon. He arrived above the mountain gate and raised his hand to activate the heaven-destroying sword array, causing 10,000 giant swords to fall from the sky. Swish! 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 20,000 giant swords fell like a meteor shower, covering a radius of a few hundred miles. It was not just the mountain gate of the Divine Blade Union that was affected. Even the lofty mountain under everyone's feet was covered by the sword array. The heaven-destroying sword array was instantly formed. The 10,000 giant swords carried a destructive force as they struck the protective array. Rumble! Crack! Crack! Suddenly, an earth-shattering sound, accompanied by a loud, shattering sound, exploded in the sky. The protective array of the Divine Blade Union could not withstand the attack of the heaven-destroying sword array. After merely persisting for 2 breaths of time, the grand formation was blasted into pieces, and a myriad of pieces sprayed out. Once the sect protecting grand formation was broken, the doomsday of many disciples and servants would come. Without the protection of the formation, the 10,000 giant swords poured down like a torrential downpour, immediately drowning the entire mountain gate. The resplendent palaces, the luxurious manors, and the courtyards all collapsed under the 10,000 swords. Thousands of disciples and odd job workers had no chance to dodge or resist, and were quickly killed by the 10,000 swords. Even the 20 divine warships could not escape the heaven-destroying sword formation, even though they had fled in panic. In the end, they were smashed into pieces by the tens of thousands of swords. For a full 10 breaths of time, the world within a radius of 500 miles was in chaos. Dazzling 5-color divine light filled heaven and earth, and endless dust and debris covered the sky. The loud rumbling continued for a long time before it dissipated. When Ji Tianxing removed the sword formation, the Divine Blade Union's mountain gate no longer existed. Within a radius of 500 miles, everything was razed to the ground. The mountains, palaces, plazas, and mansions had all turned into dust. As for the 20 divine warships, the thousands of disciples, servants, and odd job workers, they had also turned into dust and returned to heaven and earth. 2 deacons were very lucky. They had escaped the sword formation before the 10,000 giant swords descended and luckily survived. They had witnessed the destruction of the mountain gate with their own eyes and were scared out of their wits. They ran away without caring about anything else. Ji Tianxing's divine sense covered heaven and earth, and of course, he had discovered the 2 deacons. However, he did not kill them and allowed them to escape. After all, the 2 deacons would soon spread the news of the mountain gate's destruction. After the dust and debris had settled, Lin Shui, Bailong, Shui Huan, Zhan Hong, and the others looked at the ruins in a radius of a few hundred miles and were speechless. Lin Shui frowned and asked gloomily, "Tianxing, did you do it on purpose?" Ji Tianxing turned his head and looked at her, his face full of confusion. "What do you mean by on purpose?" Lin Shui snorted coldly and said, "You could have destroyed the mountain gate with your sword formation. Why did you have to watch me make a fool of myself?" Previously, she had used more than 20 superpowers consecutively and had used all her strength. However, she had not been able to break through the sect protection array. Ji Tianxing, on the other hand, had summoned 10,000 swords to attack. Not only had he destroyed the array, but he had also destroyed the entire mountain gate. The difference between the two was too great. Hearing Lin Shui's reproach, Ji Tianxing could not help but laugh. "You were too impatient. How can you blame me?" Shui Huan, Bailong, left emissary Jin, and the others could not help but laugh. Lin Shui glared at Ji Tianxing angrily and ignored him. In less than a day, the news of the mountain gate of the Divine Blade Union being destroyed spread throughout the kingdom of gods. The first to hear the news was, of course, the leader of the Divine Blade Union. The truth was just as Ji Tianxing had expected. A few days ago, the leader of the Divine Blade Union had brought the main force and elites and escaped from the mountain gate. Moreover, they had taken away the important treasures of the mountain gate, which was more than 90% of the cultivation resources. 3 days ago, the leader of the Divine Blade Union had gone to the secret division and the treasury to take away all the important treasures and resources. Although the leader of the Divine Blade Union was furious when he heard that the mountain gate had been destroyed, he was secretly glad. However, he secretly rejoiced. Those who had been killed were ordinary disciples and servants. Their deaths were not a big deal. As long as the main force and elite disciples were still around, and they had 80% of the resources and treasures in their hands, the Divine Blade Union could quickly rise again. The only loss was that the mountain gate that they had built and operated for thousands of years had been destroyed just like that. It was really a pity. However, the leader of the Divine Blade Union firmly believed that as long as they followed Prince Lian's plan, they would be able to kill Tianxing quickly. As long as they killed Tianxing and made a great contribution, Prince Lian would give them more rewards and support. At that time, the Divine Blade Union would rise again and be even more glorious. 6 days later, Ji Tianxing brought the group to the mountain gate of the Wanlu sect. The situation was just as he had expected. The people of the Wanlu sect had already escaped when they heard the news. The dazzling and majestic mountain gate had long since been emptied of people, let alone the treasury and resources. Even the herbs planted in the medicinal field and the divine beasts raised in the beast garden had been taken away. Ji Tianxing was not surprised. He waved his hand and used the sword array to destroy the mountain gate of the Wanlu sect. Nie Fiyun suggested that they go to the secret treasury of the Wanlu sect to take a look. Perhaps the people of the Wanlu sect were lucky and were hiding in the secret treasury and stronghold? Ji Tianxing waved his hand and rejected the proposal. "No need to go. The people of the Wanlu sect have enough time to transfer their wealth and resources. As long as their people are still alive, they can take a large number of treasures and resources and disperse to various places. We will be helpless. Nie Feiyun and Lin Shui both asked. Then what should we do? What should we do next? Ji Tianxing calmly said, in addition to the destruction of the Spirit Sword sect, the main force and elites of the 7 great sects have been preserved. Moreover, their hatred and anger towards this monarch has also reached the extreme. Next, we will continue south to the Raging Flame Royal City. Prince Lien will certainly gather the main force of the 7 great sects and fight us to the death. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3145. Ji Tianxing and the others took the divine ship and headed south, heading straight for the Raging Flame Royal City. In the next 10 days, the Raging Flame Divine Country was in turmoil. Of the 9 great sects under Prince Lien, the main force of the Flying Cloud sect was destroyed and Nie Feiyun surrendered. Not only was the Spirit Sword sect completely wiped out, but their sect and treasury were also destroyed. The other 7 great sects also suffered heavy losses, with their sects and headquarters destroyed. Fortunately, the elites of the 7 great sects were still there. Moreover, under the command of Prince Lien, they quickly gathered in the Heavenly Wolf County. The result was still the same as Prince Lien's original plan. The elites of the 7 great sects would fight Ji Tianxing and the others in the central part of the Heavenly Wolf County. Prince Lien's original plan was to use the 9 great sects to set up an inescapable net. But now, the 9 great sects were reduced to 7, and only the elites were left. However, this didn't affect Prince Lien much. Even the sects of the 7 great sects were destroyed, and countless disciples were killed. They had a blood feud with Ji Tianxing, so they were even more murderous and full of fighting spirit. In order to ensure the success of the siege plan, Prince Lien even used all his spies and scouts. Even the city lords and garrisons of the various counties and cities would provide him with useful clues and information. Although Prince Lien was overseeing the royal city, he was always aware of the movements of Ji Tianxing and the others, as well as their approximate location. 10 days passed quickly. That evening, Prince Lien received the latest news. The divine ship that Ji Tianxing and the others were on had already reached the central part of the Heavenly Wolf County. According to the direction of the divine ship, it would pass by the Heavenly Wolf County in a few hours. When he received this secret report, Prince Lien, who was recuperating from his injuries, immediately ended his cultivation and revealed a sinister sneer. "Ha ha! Wretched little bastard, you are indeed arrogant enough." Heading south without changing directions, they headed straight for the capital. In the end, they still fell into my inescapable net. Although you came half a month later than Ben Wang expected, but you still came in the end. The main forces of the 7 great sects are waiting for you around the Heavenly Wolf County. This time, even if you don't die, you will lose a layer of skin. Prince Lien sneered to himself. Without wasting any time, he immediately ordered, "Lien Air, immediately send a message to the leaders of the 7 major sections. Tell them to gather at Heavenly Wolf City and kill Tianxing. Let Old Dao and Luo Lushui take charge of the situation." No matter what, they had to kill Tianxing at all costs. After this battle, those who have rendered meritorious service will be rewarded handsomely. Those who die in battle will be rewarded with 3 times the compensation. Kneeling on one knee, the Lien heir hastily complied. He was about to leave the secret room to deliver the order. Wait a moment. Prince Lien suddenly called out to him and added a few more words. Also, send this king's personal decree to Sky Wolf City. Say that the fiends from the Bloodflame Divine Kingdom are massacring outside the city. Order Heavenly Wolf City to immediately dispatch troops to arrest him. There must be no mistakes. Lien Air says, "Yes," again before bowing and leaving the secret room. Late at night, outside Sky Wolf City, the night sky was as dark as ink and cold winds howled. The mountains in the distance had become undulating shadows, like gods protecting the darkness. Wolf Head Mountain, which was 20,000 miles away from Sky Wolf City, seemed a little strange tonight. Usually at night, the mountain was the world of beasts, with all kinds of beast roars rising and falling. But tonight, Wolfhead Mountain was unusually quiet. Not only were there no traces of divine beasts, but there were also no roars. The divine beasts that covered the mountain were probably scared away by the experts hiding in the mountain. In the dark forest and valleys, there were hundreds of heaven god experts hiding. Above the mountain peaks and the sky, there were more than 40 divine lords hiding. The first to arrive and lie in ambush were the people of the Divine Saber Union. The leader was the Divine Saber Union's leader, Dao Chinchio. He was a tall and sturdy old man with a face like purple jade and a head full of white hair. He wore dark golden battle armor and carried 2 dazzling golden divine sabers on his back. His eyes were like torches as he stared at the night sky in the north. His long hair fluttered in the night wind as he exuded a powerful and domineering aura. He had been famous for more than 3,000 years, and his strength had reached the peak of the 8th level Divine Lord realm. His saber arts had long reached the peak. Behind Dao Chinchio stood 2 middle-aged experts, 1 male and 1 female. They were both at the 7th level Divine Lord realm. They were the left and right protectors of the Divine Saber Union and had been famous for many years. Apart from that, there were 9 elders in the night sky. They were all mid-level Divine Lords. In the surrounding valleys, forests, and night sky, there were more than 30 low-level Divine Lords. They were all deacons of the Divine Saber Union. Everyone held their breaths and tried their best to hide their auras as they focused on the north. Everyone knew that Tianxing, who had destroyed the Divine Saber Union not long ago, would arrive tonight. Everyone was filled with anger and murderous intent. They were waiting for Tianxing to appear and fight him to the death. Tonight was the night to take revenge. Time passed quietly. Soon, it was the darkest moment of the day. In another hour, dawn would arrive. The Divine Saber Union's members were impatient. A few elders secretly sent voice transmissions to ask Dao Chinchio, "Union Master, it will be dawn soon. Why hasn't that bastard appeared yet? Union Master, did we guard the wrong place? Did that bastard pass by us long ago? Union Master, why don't we take the initiative to search for that bastard?" Dao Chinchio calmly waved his hand when he heard the elders' questions. "Don't be impatient. The young prince's orders cannot be disobeyed. The information he gave cannot be doubted. That bastard is very arrogant. Even if he knows that we are here to intercept him, he will not avoid us. Everyone, wait patiently. He will definitely come." Everyone had no choice but to obey Dao Chinchio's orders. They could only wait patiently. After another 7 minutes, a miracle occurred. A bloody light appeared in the pitch-black night sky in the north. That hazy bloody light was like lightning tearing through the night sky. It wrapped around a pitch-black divine warship and flew across the sky at lightning speed. The first to discover that bloody light were Dao Chinchio and the left and right protectors. The 3 of them felt their hearts skip a beat. They narrowed their eyes and sneered malevolently. "He is here. That bastard is indeed here. I will send a message to the other sects now. The divine warship is traveling through the night sky without concealing itself or concealing its aura." How arrogant! Dao Chinchio gritted his teeth and muttered. His entire body was bursting with killing intent. His white hair was also dancing wildly. Seeing that bloody light approaching, he decisively waved his hand and gave the order. "Disciples of the Divine Saber Union, listen up. Use all your strength to kill that bastard Tianxing at all costs." Following Dao Chinchio's thunderous voice, the 400-odd Divine Saber Union elites who were lying in ambush in the mountains let out a sonorous roar. "Kill!" In the next instant, hundreds of divine lights lit up the mountains, illuminating the area within 100 miles. Chapter 3146. Swish, 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 swish. More than 400 disciples of the Divine Saber Union, led by dozens of deacons, charged into the night sky. In an instant, a huge net that covered a radius of 100 miles was formed, blocking the path of the divine warship. Everyone was holding onto their weapons, accumulating their divine power and preparing to unleash their most powerful divine abilities and killing moves. At this moment, the speeding bloody light dissipated. The black divine warship, which was as fast as lightning, suddenly stopped and hovered 20 miles away from the crowd. Seeing this, Dao Qianxiu, the left and right protectors, and the 9 elders hurriedly flew over. Many deacons and disciples wisely suppressed their killing intent and temporarily stopped their attacks. Dao Qianxiu and the left and right protectors stepped out from the crowd and walked toward the divine warship. They shouted angrily, "Tianxing, your grandpa Dao is here. Why don't you surrender?" Their thunderous voice reverberated through the night sky, deafening everyone. The divine warship opened its cabin door, and with a flash of white light, a youth in a white robe walked out with a dignified appearance. Behind this youth in a white robe, several men and women walked out. They were all Sir God experts. Among them were Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, Bai Long, Left Emissary Jin, and Jin Hong. Only Nie Feiyun and the Blood Dragon, Right Emissary, were missing. Nie Feiyun could not show himself for the time being, and the Blood Dragon, Right Emissary, still had to steer the divine warship. Dao Qianxiu and the left and right protectors immediately locked their gazes on the youth in a white robe and sized him up angrily. When they saw the youth in a white robe clearly, the 3 of them were shocked and secretly put their guard up. He is Tianxing, that bloodthirsty and ferocious demon? Although I have heard of him long ago and have seen his portrait many times, I did not expect him to be even younger than we thought. His strength is also unfathomable. Compared to the young lord, this demon is even more mysterious and unfathomable. He makes people wary and fearful. Dao Qianxiu and the left and right protectors had a preliminary evaluation of Ji Tianxing in their hearts. At this moment, Ji Tianxing calmly looked at Dao Qianxiu and asked, "Are you the Alliance Master of the Divine Blade Union, Dao Qianxiu?" Dao Qianxiu said with a cold snort, "Little bastard, stop pretending. You personally destroyed our League's mountain gate and killed thousands of our League's disciples. How could you not know who this old man is?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and sneered. "Since the Divine Blade Union and I have an irreconcilable enmity, how can you still be so calm? Are you trying to stall for time and wait for the other sects to come and help?" Dao Qianxiu frowned as his thoughts were exposed. That's right, that's what he was thinking. This was because he also understood that it was impossible for the Divine Blade Union's 400 people to stop Ji Tianxing, much less kill him. The most likely outcome was that the people of the Divine Blade Union were all killed, and Ji Tianxing and the others left. However, Dao Qianxiu would never admit it in front of so many elders and disciples. He proudly stroked his beard and said with disdain, "Tianxing, you are now the public enemy of the kingdom of gods, and everyone has the right to kill you. Of course, the disciples of my Divine Blade Union can kill you here and cut you into pieces. However, the other sects have all suffered from your evil schemes, and like our Divine Blade Union, they all have a blood feud with you. Of course, this old man can't have the chance to kill you alone, so I have to wait for the other sects to kill you together. At that time, you'll be cut into pieces, and your bones will be ground to dust. Only then can the hatred in this old man's heart be dispelled." Ji Tianxing frowned and said with disdain, "You are clearly afraid of my reputation, yet you speak in such a dignified manner. You're already so old, yet you are still so shameless. It is really embarrassing. Forget it. The people of the Divine Blade Union are not enough for this old man's sword. Since you want to stall for time, this old man will fulfill your wish. When the other sects have all arrived, this old man will deal with you all at once, saving more time." Ji Tianxing was speaking the truth, as he had originally planned to do so. The main reason was that he was afraid that if he used the heaven-destroying sword formation, he would quickly kill all the people of the Divine Blade Union. At that time, when the other sects arrived and saw the terrifying power of the heaven-destroying sword formation, they would not even have the courage to attack. In that case, the other sects would have to flee in all directions again. He still had to find another opportunity to wipe out the main forces of the other sects in one fell swoop. What a waste of time. However, Ji Tianxing's words sounded extremely arrogant and domineering in the ears of the Divine Blade Union's disciples. It was abnormally ear-piercing. "You damned beast, don't be so arrogant. A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. You are a butcher, an executioner. This Union's disciples will fight you to the end. Tonight, the Divine Blade Union is united as one, and we vow to kill this evil thief." Many hot-blooded disciples and deacons roared with righteous indignation. Ji Tianxing could not be bothered with them. He stood proudly in the night sky and waited quietly. Lin Shui held the crimson blade and stood behind him. When she heard the curses and provocations of the Divine Blade Union's disciples, she was so angry that her teeth itched. She could not wait to start a massacre. However, with the lesson of the Divine Blade Union's Mountain Gate, she had learned her lesson and did not act rashly. The Blood Illusion God, Bai Long, and the rest were obviously more composed. All of them were silent, holding their swords and sabers as they waited for the other sects to arrive. However, they did not have much confidence in their hearts. With their small number of people, it was already very dangerous for them to deal with more than 400 people from the Divine Blade Union. If the main forces of the other sects arrived, the difference in numbers between the two sides would be even more terrifying. However, when they saw Ji Tianxing's calm and confident demeanor, they were relieved. Since Ji Tianxing was willing to wait, Dao Qinxiu was naturally more than happy to oblige. He and the left and right protectors were even secretly sneering. The rumors are true. This kid is indeed extremely arrogant and lawless. If he is not bluffing, how confident must he be to dare to wait for the other sects to arrive? The Divine Blade Union cannot fight alone. We must wait for the other sects to arrive before joining forces to kill this bastard. Since this bastard is so arrogant, there is hope for revenge tonight. In less than 15 minutes, a divine light flew over from the night sky in the west. When the dazzling divine light rushed over with murderous intent, the crowd could see clearly that it was a team of more than 300 people. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing and the others to observe, the leader of the group introduced himself in a loud voice. "Tianxing, you bastard. Overlord Pavilion's Su Donglai is here. Tonight, I will take your life to avenge my disciples." Obviously, this team was from Overlord Pavilion. The Pavilion Master, Su Donglai, was an 8th level Divine Lord. Behind him were the Deputy Pavilion Master and a few elders, all of whom were middle-level Divine Lords. Ji Tianxing only glanced at the people from Overlord Pavilion and ignored them. Su Donglai thought that the Divine Blade Union was fighting with Ji Tianxing and that he would be able to save the situation if he rushed over. He did not expect that the Divine Blade Union and Tianxing's group would be facing each other without any intention of attacking. He had rushed over with his men from Overlord Pavilion, but he was ignored by the two groups of people. It was extremely awkward. The fastest mobile version of the website. Chapter 3147. Ji Tianxing and the others stood in the night sky, waiting for the wind to blow. In the southern night sky, Dao Qinxiu and the Divine Blade Union blocked the way, forming a large encirclement. When the Overlord Pavilion saw that both sides were not moving, they could only stop in the southwest night sky, holding their swords and sabers. Unable to hold back the awkward atmosphere, Su Donglai took 2 steps forward, looked at Dao Qinxiu, and asked for the situation through telepathy. "Senior Dao, what's going on?" Our sect received the message and immediately rushed over to help. "Your union has already intercepted that scum Tianxing. Why haven't you made a move yet? Could it be that the young prince has other orders?" Dao Qinxiu glanced at Su Donglai and couldn't help but say through telepathy, "Overlord Su, you're an old man who has lived for thousands of years. Why are you still so ignorant? Do you still need to ask about the current situation? No matter how much you want to take revenge, you can't rush to kill. If your Overlord Pavilion really rushes in, you'll all be killed in a moment. Wasn't the lesson from before painful enough? Can any of our sects deal with that demon Tianxing?" Su Donglai was 3 feet tall and as strong as an iron tower. His appearance was fierce and valiant, and his personality was also very fiery. His natal divine weapons were 2 Thunder God hammers, and his combat power was very strong. It was because of this that he won the title of Overlord Su. However, this also proved that this person was brave but not astute, and had no shrewdness to speak of. After being mocked by Dao Qinxiu, Su Donglai's face was lost, but he could only endure it, not daring to lose his temper. After all, Dao Qinxiu was the leader of a top force and a senior who had made a name for himself earlier. Moreover, they were all allies in the same trench, and they would be fighting side by side in a moment, sharing life and death. No matter what, they had to maintain harmony. After a moment of silence, Su Donglai suppressed the anger in his heart and said to Dao Qinxiu, through telepathy, "Senior Dao, you're right. I didn't think it through." Then, Su Donglai and the Overlord Pavilion's people waited patiently. Time continued to pass. After a while, more than 300 elite disciples of the Soaring Rainbow sect flew over in a mighty manner. Then, the elite forces of the Myriad Flow sect, the Mystic Moon sect, the Blue Thunder sect, and the Unique Tower arrived one after another. The elite forces of the 7 major sects had arrived and surrounded Ji Tianxing and the others from 7 directions. There were a total of over 2,500 people, and 90% of them were Heavenly Deity Realm elite experts. The number of lower divine lords reached over 260. There were also over 50 middle divine lords. Even the high divine lords numbered more than 20. It could be said that such a huge battle array was rarely seen in 100 years. Previously, the people from the Divine Blade Union, Overlord Pavilion, and Soaring Rainbow sect were still wary of Ji Tianxing and did not dare to take the initiative to attack. They could only wait patiently. Now, with so many powerhouses and experts gathered, the people of the 3 major sects were full of confidence and fighting spirit. Almost everyone was certain that tonight's battle would be won without a doubt. No matter how powerful Tianxing was, it was impossible for him to leave this place alive. Over 2,000 experts from the 7 major sects were enough to destroy everything within a radius of 100,000 miles. It was more than enough to kill a peak 9th Heaven Divine Lord. Thinking up to here, the 7 major sects, sect masters, and alliance chiefs all became high-spirited and dignified. They all stood in front of the crowd and shouted at Ji, Tianxing, and the others, provoking them. "Tianxing, now that the inescapable net has been set, you have nowhere to run. Accept your death obediently. I said before that I will cut you into 1,000 pieces and grind your bones to dust before I can dispel the hatred in my heart. Now, it's time to fulfill my promise. Kid, haven't you always been very arrogant? Now that you're in such a situation, can you still be arrogant? Ha ha! Back then, when you massacred the disciples of the various sects and destroyed the various sects, you should have thought of today's outcome. Bastard, I hope you continue to be arrogant and don't surrender. Otherwise, I'll look down on you. Yes, it's useless even if you surrender. I have to cut you into 1,000 pieces to dispel my hatred." The 7 sect masters and sect masters were all filled with righteous indignation and murderous intent, looking extremely confident. This led to more than 2,000 disciples of the 7 major sects, who were also confident that victory was in their hands. Many people were even discussing that with so many people besieging Tianxing, they were afraid that a round of bombardment would end the battle. At that time, Tianxing would be directly blasted into pieces. That would be too easy a death. They must not let him die so easily. Hearing the shouts of the sect masters and the clamor of countless divine realm experts, Ji Tianxing finally spoke. "After waiting for 2 hours, the sky is already bright. You've finally gathered. Everything ends here. Dao Qinxiu, remember to send a message to Prince Lian before you die. Tell him to wash his neck and wait for me." Hearing these words, seeing that Ji Tianxing was still arrogant, the sect masters, elders, and disciples of the various sects gnashed their teeth in hatred. Dao Qinxiu was so angry that he laughed and was about to refute. Unexpectedly, Ji Tianxing had lost his patience and no longer gave him a chance to talk nonsense. "Sword come. Ji Tianqing made a divine art with both hands, shouted in a low voice, and used his trump card. Swoosh! Swoosh! Suddenly, the distant sky lit up with dazzling starlight. 20,000 starry swords rained down like a meteor shower, shrouding the entire area. Thousands of miles of heaven and earth were illuminated, and the originally bright heaven and earth were illuminated even more clearly. An invisible aura that could suppress heaven and earth instantly enveloped everyone. The violent and unparalleled sword intent that could destroy everything also fiercely suppressed the disciples of the 7 major sections. Seeing the 10,000 swords descending, the disciples of the major sects all changed their expressions wildly and let out a cry of horror. Oh my God! 10,000 swords descending again. Is this the divine punishment that was spread before? It's really Tianqing's doing. Danger! Everyone, let's work together to resist. After everyone reacted, they all panicked and used their divine abilities, forming a battle formation to defend together. After all, everyone knew the power of the divine punishment. Under the simultaneous attack of the 10,000 swords, the mountain gates of the various sects were destroyed in just 2 breaths. Not only did the heaven and earth within 1,000 miles turn into ruins, thousands of disciples were also blasted into smithereens. The power was extremely terrifying. However, by the time the disciples of the various sects formed a battle formation and cast spells to resist, it was already too late. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The heaven-vanquishing sword formation that enveloped a radius of 2,000 miles was instantly formed. Tens of thousands of divine giant swords that were 10,000 feet tall, with unparalleled power blasted into the crowd of the 7 major sections. Boom, 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 boom. Following the deafening explosion, the heaven and earth became chaotic. The towering wolf head mountain instantly turned into ruins and flattened to the ground. The battle formations of the various major sects were also blasted into disorder, and the elite disciples were utterly defeated. In just a breath's time, more than 400 heaven god experts died tragically under the bombardment of the 10,000 swords, turning into a rain of blood and smithereens on the spot. Not to mention the heaven god realm disciples, even the lower-level divine lord deacons could not withstand the power of the divine swords. Such a tragic scene shocked the people of the 7 major sects, causing everyone to feel a chill all over and fear in their hearts. Mobile version of the website. Chapter 3148. Before the battle, the disciples of the 7 major sects were full of confidence and high morale. Everyone thought that with more than 2,000 people from the 7 major sects attacking together, they would be able to kill Ji Tianqing in less than 2 rounds. But the truth was the opposite. Ji Tianqing's first attack was like a divine punishment. Both sides had only exchanged 1 round, and the divine attacks of the 7 major sects were defeated by the 10,000 swords. Moreover, more than 400 disciples from the 7th to 9th level of the heavenly god realm died tragically under the 10,000 swords. What kind of shocking reversal was this? For a moment, everyone was shocked to the extreme, dumbfounded. It was only then that the main forces and elites of the 7 major sects realized how terrifying Tianqing was. It was no wonder that this person could stir up chaos in the Bloody Flames Divine Kingdom and set off a bloodbath in the Raging Flames Divine Kingdom. It was no wonder that this person could become Prince Lian's enemy and make Prince Lian suffer losses time and time again. With such terrifying strength, even a 9th-level peak monarch god might not be able to compare to him. Just as everyone was in a daze, the Heaven Punishment Sword formation sped up and released more divine, giant swords, bursting with even more power. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Sharp, ear-piercing sounds kept exploding in the sword formation. Sword light flashed, and sword chi crisscrossed. An invisible sword intent covered a radius of a few hundred miles. In just a breath's time, more than 100 elite disciples died tragically under the 10,000 swords. Even those monarch god realm deacons were seriously injured when they were hit by the divine giant swords. The situation became more serious. The elites and main forces of the 7 major sects had no time to be surprised and shocked. Everyone came back to their senses and burst out with their most powerful strength. They displayed their most powerful divine skills to resist the power of the 10,000 swords. 7 huge battle formations were quickly formed. The dazzling divine power light caused chaos in the sword formation. The major sects resisted with all their strength, and it was effective. After 10 breaths, more than 300 disciples and more than a dozen monarch god experts could not resist the power of the 10,000 swords and were killed on the spot. Although this scene was tragic, compared to before, they had indeed stabilized their footing. In addition, the sect leaders and elders of the 7 major sects tried their best to resist the 10,000 swords and even took the initiative to attack Ji Tianxing and the others. As a result, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the others had no choice but to wield their Kenshin weapons and attack with all their might. Starry River Break. Ji Tianxing roared in rage. He gripped the Burial of Heaven sword with both of his hands and hacked down the 1,000-zhong long starry sword. Following this, Dao Qianxiu, Su Donglai, and the others were sent flying while spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Blood stains the horizon. Shui Lin sneered cunningly. She waved the blood saber with all her might and slashed out a 1,000-foot-long blood saber towards the crowd. Instantly, the dozen or so middle-level divine lord elders were forced back by the blood-colored saber light. Sir God Blood Illusion by Long, Zhen Hong, and company also used their best skills to fend off the attacks of the Sir Gods. This world-shaking battle was destined to not end in a short period of time. As time passed, the losses of the 7 sects became more and more severe. The initial 2,000 disciples were gradually reduced to 2,000, 1,800, 1,300, 1,000 by the time the battle had been going on for 15 minutes. The number of disciples of the 7 sects had been reduced to 600. On average, the number of disciples of each sect that survived was less than 100. Even half of the dozens of lower-level divine lords had been killed. Only those upper-level divine lords could withstand the power of the tens of thousands of swords. They were only slightly injured and were not killed. The 7 sects had suffered heavy losses. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing, Lin Shui, and the others did not suffer any injuries. Not a single person had died in the battle. There were not even any seriously injured. However, Bai Long, Gold Left Emissary, Blood Dragon Right Emissary, and Zhen Hong were slightly weaker and had only suffered light injuries. The people of the 7 sects could not understand and did not dare to believe such a great disparity. However, this was the truth. A heaven punishment sword formation was enough to change everything. The area within a radius of 2,000 miles was enveloped by the sword formation. This region was completely filled with sword light. If one was slightly careless, or if one's strength was slightly weaker, they would be enveloped by countless sacred giant swords and be smashed to pieces, perishing on the spot. As for the 7 sects' disciples, no matter how desperately they counterattacked, it was also not of much use. Countless divine abilities and ultimate skills were all defeated by the tens of thousands of swords. Even if there were a few divine art-light shadows that could avoid the bombardment of the divine swords, they could not unleash much power. Very soon, 30 minutes passed. The 7 sects' numbers were reduced again. There were only 300-plus people left. Those who could survive were mostly divine Lord Realm powerhouses. Only an extremely small number of Celestial Deity Realm elite disciples were left. Furthermore, more than half of the 300-plus people who were lucky enough to survive were also seriously injured. At this point in the battle, the people of the 7 sects were already terrified. They could not imagine that Ji Tianxing alone could rival 1,000 troops. Just relying on a heaven punishment sword formation, he could annihilate several thousand experts. This was simply not something that a divine lord could accomplish. Probably only divine king powerhouses had such horrifying means. The various major sects people all had thoughts of retreating, not wishing to get entangled with Ji Tianxing anymore. They were also not willing to carry on the killing. But very sadly, the heaven punishment sword formation had been operating all along. Its power was extraordinary. Even if the various major sects people wanted to retreat, it was already too late. The heaven punishment sword formation sealed off 2,000 miles of heaven and earth. They could only escape with their lives by breaking through the seal of the sword formation. But that sword light that blotted out the sky and blotted out the sun was as dense as a rain of arrows. Everyone was already trembling with fear in the sword formation, advancing step by step with caution. If they wanted to break out of the encirclement for several thousand feet, they would have to suffer several hundred giant swords. Wanting to successfully escape the range of the sword formation was simply as difficult as ascending to the heavens. The situation at hand was truly a hopeless situation, a situation of certain death, resulting in the various major sects people being filled with sorrow, not knowing what to do. Continue fighting the great battle? Not only could they not injure Ji Tianxing and the rest, they would also continuously exhaust themselves until they were completely wiped out. If they tried their best to break out of the encirclement and escape, they might have a chance of survival, but they would definitely have to pay a terrible price. Therefore, the leaders and elders of a few minor sects thought of a safer way. That was to declare a truce and surrender to Ji Tianxing. In everyone's eyes, Ji Tianxing was not a true demon who loved to kill. According to the rules of the Jianghu, as long as they surrendered, Ji Tianxing would not be so ruthless. Unexpectedly, the moment the leaders and elders of a few major sects expressed this intention, they suffered a severe blow. Ji Tianxing's unyielding attitude made it clear that he did not accept surrenders and did not need prisoners. Since the great battle had already begun, they would fight to the last drop of blood until death. Such an answer made the people of the 7 major sects extremely angry and humiliated. They had never thought that they would not be forgiven for surrendering while bearing the burden of humiliation. Ji Tianxing also claimed that if the major sects had announced their separation from Prince Lian before the great battle tonight, they would still have a chance of survival. Unfortunately, the 7 major sects had chosen a fight, which meant that only death awaited them. Chapter 3149. Ji Tianxing's attitude was clear. The people from the 7 sects no longer had any hopes or expectations. It was useless to admit defeat and surrender. They only had 2 choices. They could either fight to the end or break out of the encirclement. As the leaders of the 7 sects, the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect were the forces that Prince Lian valued the most. Their choice was obvious. They would follow Prince Lian's instructions and fight to the end. Even if they were completely wiped out, they would take Ji Tianxing down with them at all costs. Hence, the disciples, deacons, and elders of the 2 sects were unusually brave and fierce. As for the other 5 sects, they were not top forces to begin with. For them to be able to survive until now and still prosper, they naturally had the same way of survival. At any time, these sects would not give up their chance of survival for a moment of loyalty and morality. Hence, the sect leaders of the 5 sects came to an agreement and decided to work together to break out of the encirclement. The Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect fought to the end without any regard for their own safety. As for the deacons and elders of the 5 sects, they chose to break out of the encirclement with all their might. To Ji Tianxing and the rest, this was indeed a big problem. If they tried their best to stop the 5 sects, they would definitely overlook the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect, and they would be in danger. If they tried their best to stop the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect, they would give the 5 sects a chance to escape. Faced with this problem, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest found it difficult to make a choice. However, Ji Tianxing's reaction was very calm. Furthermore, he had expected the 7 sects to react in such a way. Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest would find it difficult to stop the 5 sects from breaking out of the encirclement, and it would also be difficult for them to fend off the all-out attack of the Divine Knife Union and the Thousand Flowing Sect. Hence, everyone asked Ji Tianxing through voice transmission, how should they choose? Ji Tianxing replied calmly, "Only the weak make the choice, and I choose to kill them all." Such confident and domineering words stunned Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest. While their blood was boiling and they were feeling heroic, they could not help but ask, what should they do? Ji Tianxing said straightforwardly, all of you go all out to stop the 5 sect from breaking through the encirclement. I will control the sword formation to help. There will be no problem. As for the people from the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect, just leave them to me. Seeing him so confident, Lin Shui and God Monarch Blood Illusion felt worried and worried. Young Master, are you going to intercept the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect by yourself? Are you sure? Brat, don't force yourself. Ji Tianxing didn't bother to explain. He immediately raised the Sword of Burial of Heaven and charged towards the Divine Saber Union and Myriad Flow sect with an unparalleled stance. Heavenly Dragon World / Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He swung his sword with his right hand and slashed out a 20-mile-long golden dragon sword light that swept away the people of the 2 sections. Clenching his left hand into a fist, he punched out a mountain-sized dragon and elephant shadow towards Dao Qinxiu and Sect Master Wan Lu. In an instant, more than 20 Divine Lord powerhouses were forced back by the golden dragon sword light, their faces filled with shock. 6 Divine Lords couldn't dodge in time and were struck by the golden dragon sword light. Their divine bodies crumbled and their divine heads were shattered. As for the dragon and elephant shadow that destroyed everything, it forced Dao Qinxiu and Sect Master Wan Lu to retreat in a panic, allowing them to escape the calamity. Before the people from the 2 sects could recover from their shock, Ji Tianxing swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven again and used all sorts of Sword Dao superpowers. Swish, swish, swish. Instantly, the resplendent sword light that covered the sky and carried the power to destroy everything enveloped the deacons and elders. The violent and domineering sword intent enveloped the low-level and mid-level Divine Lords, causing them to flee in panic. Most of them managed to escape, but there were still a few Divine Lord powerhouses that couldn't escape from the sword light that filled the sky. They were turned into a bloody pulp on the spot. At the same time, Ji Tianxing used Sky-Piercing Finger and Sky-Splitting Palm to force Dao Qinxiu and Sect Master Wan Lu to retreat. It was a pity that the 2 8th-degree realm sect masters were once unparalleled powerhouses who could summon the wind and rain. Now that they couldn't defeat Ji Tianxing even after joining forces, they were extremely aggrieved. The 2 of them were forced to retreat again and could only watch as the deacons and elders under them were killed, but they were powerless to save them. Just like that, 3 breaths time passed. When Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest saw how powerful Ji Tianxing was, the doubts in their hearts were dispelled. Since Ji Tianxing alone could suppress the Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wan Lu, they had nothing to worry about. Therefore, Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, Bai Long and the rest tried their best to kill the 5 sects and used all sorts of superpowers. If it was just a few of them, they definitely wouldn't be able to stop the people from the 5 sections. But with the help of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array, thousands of divine giant swords continued to kill the people from the 5 sects. This reduced the pressure on Lin Shui, Sir God Blood Illusion, and the rest by a lot. They didn't need to risk their lives to fight with the people from the 5 sections. They only needed to use all their strength to display all sorts of superpowers and ultimate skills to stop the people from the 5 sects, and it would be a success. The deacons and elders from the 5 sects were originally unable to move an inch because of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array's attacks. Now that they were met with Lin Shui and the rest attacks, they found it even more difficult to move forward and were in a perilous situation. 100 breaths time passed. The people from the 5 sects huddled together and only managed to break through 80 miles. But the price they paid was extremely heavy. Close to half of the deacons and elders died under the bombardment of the 10,000 swords, and their god bodies and god sparks were turned into dregs. The path to break through was so difficult that it made the people from the 5 sects feel extremely hopeless. They were even thinking that if they didn't risk their lives to break through and fought with the people from Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wan Lu, would the outcome be better? But When the people from the 5 sects turned back and looked at the battlefield in the middle of the sword array, they instantly dismissed this thought. Because Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wanlu's situation was even more miserable than theirs. Ji Tianxing alone, with the help of the Heaven Eradication Sword Array, had actually caused the people from Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wanlu to throw away their helmets and armor and be utterly defeated. Previously, there were still 60 Overseer God experts, but now, more than half of them had been killed. There were only 20 or so people left, and they were still fighting a bloody battle, but they were also arrows at the end of their flight. These people were the elders, guardians, and vice-sect masters of Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wanlu. Basically, they were all Sir Gods of the 5th degree realm and above. Those low-level divine, lord-level deacons had long been killed off by Ji Tianxing. Even so, the surviving elders and protectors were covered in blood, and they were in an extremely miserable state. Even though Dao Qianxiu and Sect Master Wanlu had also changed their strategy. They joined forces with the elders and guardians to launch a strong attack on Ji Tianxing. But the effect was minimal, and Ji Tianxing could easily avoid most of the attacks. Occasionally, there were some secret arts that he couldn't avoid, but he could easily withstand it with his strong defense. Even if the experts from the 2 sects used all their strength to deal a fatal blow, Ji Tianxing really couldn't avoid it. He could also use the infinite sky of turbidity to resolve it easily. All in all, he was in an invincible position. No matter how the people from Divine Blade Union and Sect Master Wanlu attacked, he wasn't injured. Chapter 3150. In the end, this earth-shattering battle lasted for nearly an hour before it finally came to an end. The people from the 5 major sects were the first to perish. Almost all the elders and protectors were dead. The few remaining sect leaders were also covered in blood and looked miserable. Their fighting strength had greatly decreased. At this moment, they were still 1,000 miles away from the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. Now that they had fallen into such a situation, the sect leaders were in complete despair. They knew that they would never be able to break out of the encirclement in this lifetime. Now that they were at the end of their rope, there was only one way to save their lives. That was to meet up with the elites from the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect and fight until the end. However, when they saw the situation of the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect, they felt a chill from head to toe. This was because the people from the Divine Knife Alliance and the Thousand Flow sect had also suffered heavy casualties. Almost all the middle-level Divine Lords had been killed. Only a few people were left. They were still fighting a bloody battle, but they were like cornered beasts. Among them were Dao Qianxiu, the left and right protectors of the Divine Knife Alliance, and the Thousand Flow sect leader and deputy sect leader. These 5 elites were all high-level Divine Lords. It would be difficult to kill them in a short period of time with a heaven-destroying sword formation. Ji Tianxing was alone. No matter how strong he was, he could not kill them quickly. The situation was in a stalemate. However, overall, Ji Tianxing still had the upper hand. Not only was he uninjured, but his fighting strength was also at its peak. His divine power was still abundant. It was as if he would never be injured or tired. He was undefeatable. Such a strong performance made Dao Qianxiu, the Thousand Flow sect leader, and the others feel completely hopeless and helpless. My God, how can there be such a perverted guy in this world? After fighting for so long, even if he was made of iron, he would still be full of holes. What kind of monster is he? Why is he not injured at all? Why is his fighting strength still so strong? It's only now that this seat finally understands why the little prince calls him a fated enemy. This lesson made us understand that we should never underestimate our enemies, especially those who are famous. Unfortunately, when we understood this lesson, it was already too late. If I could turn back time, even if I betrayed the little prince, I would never have participated in the assassination. We've all been used as cannon fodder by the little prince. We're destined to die here today. The sect leaders and sect masters all felt the same, gloomy and hopeless. They were all terrified and regretful. If they could choose again, they would rather betray Prince Lien than obey orders and participate in this decisive battle. But they also knew that it was too late to say anything now. People make mistakes in their lives, and they have to pay for their mistakes. They can't escape from it. Now that things had come to this, it was useless to say anything else. Only by exerting his last bit of strength and bleeding his last drop of blood would he have a slim chance of survival. Thinking of this, Dao Qinxiu and the sect master of the Myriad Flow sect could not help but cry out, "Since we've chosen to fight to the end, we'll never turn back until we die. Life can't be restarted. Regret is useless. The only thing we can do is fight to the end." After shouting, the two of them led the left and right protectors and the vice sect master to launch a final attack on Ji Tianxing. At the same time, the sect leaders and sect masters of the 5 major sects also rushed over. "Senior Dao, Senior Luo, we're willing to fight side by side with you until the end. Seniors, we're here to help you." The sect leaders of the 5 major sects shouted loudly, waving their swords and sabers at Ji Tianxing. Seeing the reaction of the sect leaders of the 5 major sects, Dao Qinxiu and Luo Lushui were not excited at all. Instead, they smiled contemptuously. "A bunch of motley crew. Why are you here when you can't escape? Idiots with no integrity and strength of character. Didn't you try to break out of the encirclement? What's wrong? Now that you've failed, you think of us?" Since it was a matter of life and death, Dao Qinxiu and Luo Lushui did not show any mercy and directly mocked and attacked. The faces of the 5 sect leaders were very ugly. They were green and red with shame. But at this moment of life and death, the 5 of them did not dare to be angry with Dao Qinxiu and Luo Lushui. They could only explain, "Seniors, please don't blame us. We were confused for a moment and made a big mistake. Now that we've made up for it, I hope it's not too late. Since there's no way out, we can only fight to the death. We're willing to fight side by side with the 2 seniors. I hope we can kill the evil thief Tianxing in one go and complete the mission that the young prince gave us." The 5 sect leaders found a way out for themselves. Dao Qinxiu and Luo Lushui did not pursue the matter. In fact, with the left and right protectors and the vice sect master, it was almost impossible for them to break out of the encirclement. If they could get the help of the 5 sect leaders, at least their forces would be strengthened and their chances would increase. Therefore, the 10 high-level divine lords gathered together and worked together to attack Ji Tianxing. But Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God, White Dragon, and the others also rushed over. With the 10 high-level divine lords attacking Ji Tianxing, they were outside, harassing and attacking the other divine lords. Even if they could not kill those high-level divine lords, they could hold them back and greatly reduce the pressure on Ji Tianxing. This was tonight's final battle. At the same time, it was also the battle of life and death for the 7 major sections. The 7 sect leaders and the 10 high-level divine lords spared no expense and used all their strength to fight Ji Tianxing and the others. But unfortunately, arms could not win against thighs. The difference in strength was there, and it was not something that could be changed by courage and fighting spirit. 30 breaths later, the sect leader of the Soaring Rainbow sect was killed by Ji Tianxing, dying tragically under the burial of heaven. 50 breaths later, the right protector of the Divine Blade Union was killed, his divine body and divine spark crumbling. 100 breaths later, the left protector of the Divine Blade Union and the sect leader of the Blue Thunder sect were killed by Ji Tianxing. As time passed, the 10 high-level divine lords were killed one after another, and the number of people kept decreasing. 15 minutes later, the 5 sect leaders were killed. 2 of them died under the joint attack of Lin Shui, Blood Illusion God, and the others. Only Dao Qinxiu and Luo Lushui survived to the end. Of course, the 2 of them were also riddled with wounds and broken limbs. Their fighting strength was extremely weak. Dao Qinxiu was still domineering. Knowing that he was going to die, he detonated himself, wanting to perish together with Ji Tianxing. However, Luo Lushui still had hope and did not detonate himself. Instead, he hurriedly dodged. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing used his ultimate skill and used the World Slash to instantly kill Dao Qinxiu, interrupting his detonation. Of the 10 high-level divine lords, only Luo Lushui was still alive. Not only did he not detonate himself, but he also shouted loudly for the battle to stop. He wanted to surrender and be loyal to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing rejected him on the spot, saying that he did not need captives. However, Luo Lushui said firmly, "No, that old felon Ye Feiyun is not dead. He must have surrendered to you. Since you can forgive him, why can't you forgive me? As long as you spare my life, I will definitely be of greater use to you. I will be of greater help to you than Ye Feiyun. You are very sincere, but I don't need it. Goodbye." Ji Tianxing did not hesitate at all. He directly waved the burial of heaven and killed him. At this point, the 7 major sects were completely annihilated. Chapter 31:51. Luo Liushui's identity, status, and fame were all higher than Ye Feiyun's. If it wasn't a matter of life and death, how could he lower his proud head? Even if it was for survival, he surrendered to Ji Tianxing. Who could guarantee how much sincerity he had? After saving his life, his hatred and humiliation would flare up, and he would most likely seek revenge. After all, he was the sect master of the Thousand Flows sect, a top figure of the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. How could he swallow this anger? Although Luo Lushui might have more information and secrets than Ye Feiyun. However, after giving it some thought, Ji Tianxing decided that it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. He would kill Luo Lushui on the spot to prevent future trouble. After all, the 9 major sects under Prince Lian had been destroyed. The only people he could use now were the people of the Hetian sect, the Raging Flame branch, and the powerhouses of the Raging Flame royal family. Ji Tianxing's next target was to point his sword at the imperial city and kill Prince Lian. Of course, if he could get the secrets of the Great Yin Empire from Prince Lian, it would be best if he could get information about the Boundless Heaven Continent and the Shura God Emperor. The battle was over, and the world returned to peace. It was morning, and the sun had risen. Ji Tianxing and the others' battle record was amazing enough to shock the Raging Flame Divine Kingdom. But Lin Shui, Shui Huan, Bai Long, and the others were all heavily injured and covered in wounds and blood. They rested while cleaning up the battlefield and collecting the spoils of war. The battlefield, with a radius of 2,000 miles, was originally a rolling mountain range full of ravines and deep valleys. But now, it had been razed to the ground, and the central area was deeply sunken. In a few years, the water on this battlefield would accumulate and become a large lake in the vast mountain range. The people who participated in this battle were the main forces and powerhouses of the 7 major sections. They were all well-equipped and had elite strength. Moreover, the 7 major sects had evacuated in advance and taken away the treasures in their vaults. Most of the cultivation resources and treasures were carried by the sect masters, protectors, and elders and stored in the interspatial rings. So, Lin Shui and the others were the most excited about the spoils of war this time. In the battlefield, they found nearly 2,000 spatial rings and more than 1,000 sets of usable divine weapons. He casually opened a few spatial rings, and there was a dazzling collection. There were all kinds of divine stones, divine pills, divine materials, and rare treasures. It was a feast for the eyes. The various sects, celestial deity, realm, disciples, often carried several million on them. As for the disciples of the Divine Blade Union and the Myriad Flow sect, they were even wealthier. Their belongings were worth tens of millions. As for the deacons of the various sects, the resources stored in their interspatial rings were worth more than 100 million. As for those middle-level Divine Lord Elders, high-level Divine Lord Protectors, and sect masters, the amount of wealth in their interspatial rings was immeasurable. Each of them had cultivation resources worth billions, as well as all sorts of divine items and treasures that were hard to estimate. After a rough estimation, the total value of the spoils they had obtained was over 100 billion. Such a huge amount of wealth was already comparable to Ji Tianxing's savings. Shui Lin, Sir Godblood Illusion, and Left Emissary Jean had never seen such a huge amount of resources and treasures in their lives. Everyone was in high spirits, cheering and exclaiming from time to time. Lin lamented. Cultivation resources and treasures worth more than 100 billion. If I were to take them all for myself, I wouldn't have to worry about cultivation resources for the rest of my life. Of course, she was just saying it. She didn't really have the thought of taking them all for herself. Lin, left emissary Jean, Zhan Hong, and the rest also understood that she was just lamenting and shocked. After all, they had the same thought and were all shocked. After a few minutes, everyone finished cleaning up the battlefield and counting their spoils. There was a total of 2,010 interspatial rings, more than 1,200 sets of divine weapons and equipment, and more than 100 pieces of divine Lord Expert's Godhead fragments. Everyone handed these spoils to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing wasn't just the leader of the group, he was also the core of this battle. Most of the middle-level and high-level divine lords were killed by him. More than half of the 2,000 disciples of the 7 major sects were killed by the Heaven Punishment Sword formation. It could be said that 70% of the 2,000 people of the 7 major sects were killed by him. Therefore, the spoils had to be distributed by him. Everyone felt that even if Ji Tianqing took 90% of the spoils, it would be very fair for him to only take out 10% of the resources to share with everyone. However, Ji Tianqing clearly didn't think so. He only wanted the 100 pieces of Godhead fragments and the interspatial rings of the 7 sect masters and sect leaders. The remaining 2,000 interspatial rings, more than 1,000 sets of equipment, and items worth 60 to 70 billion divine stones were distributed to everyone. Last night's battle was extremely dangerous. Everyone fought to the end, bathed in blood, and contributed greatly. I haven't sorted out these spoils yet. I will distribute them to everyone after sorting them out. After he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing put away the spoils of war. He would distribute them to everyone after sorting them out. No one had any objections. Lin Shui took out the divine warship, and everyone prepared to leave. However, at this moment, a dazzling divine light lit up in the direction of Sky Wolf City. A group of elite warriors wearing armor and wielding sabers, swords, spears, and halberds appeared a few thousand miles away from the group and charged toward them at lightning speed. In the face of such a sudden situation, everyone frowned and observed vigilantly. They saw that there were more than 1,000 people in the group, all wearing standard black armor and helmets. They looked murderous. At the front of the group was a middle-level divine lord wearing golden armor and a dark red cloak. He was dressed like a general or commander. Behind this person were 10 lower-level divine lords wearing silver armor and carrying swords at their waists. They looked like they had high official positions. As for the 1,000 warriors, they were all celestial god experts with strength between level 4 and level 8. Ji Tianqing and the others could tell at a glance that this group was not from a sect. They looked more like the guards of a city or a troop from a military camp. Since the group came from Sky Wolf City, Ji Tianqing frowned and muttered, "Could it be the city guards of Sky Wolf City? Are they also here to get involved?" In a flash, the 1,000-man troop arrived. When they were still 100 miles away, the 1,000-man troop spread out and formed a huge encirclement, surrounding Ji Tianqing and the others. The golden-armored general in the lead shouted coldly in a booming voice, "Who are you to dare to wantonly slaughter civilians outside Sky Wolf City? Surrender immediately." A few lower-level divine lords in silver armor also roared with murderous intent, bolstering their momentum. "Foreign race thieves, this is Sky Wolf City's territory. Only death awaits you for daring to cause trouble here. We are the city guards of Sky Wolf City. We are under the orders of the city lord to capture the rebels. You cruel and bloodthirsty thugs, why don't you surrender now? Damn thugs, you are already surrounded. Don't even think of escaping." Chapter 31:52. The commanders and captains of the Celestial Wolf City Guard were imposing and dignified. After the 1,000 city guards formed a huge encirclement, they remained solemn and quiet. They appeared to be well-trained. A murderous aura pervaded the air. However, Ji Tianqing, Lin Shui, and the others sneered. Ji Tianqing looked at the golden-armored commander and said in a dignified tone, "Don't play dumb. You should know who I am. The people of the 7 major sects are all dead, yet you still dare to show your face. I really admire your courage." The golden-armored commander was clearly stunned. He frowned and asked in confusion, "What 7 major sects? What are you talking about? I don't know you. I'm only here on the orders of the city lord to encircle and annihilate the murderers. Kid, I don't care who you are or what power or background you have. You have violated the laws of Celestial Wolf City and will be punished. If you dare to resist, you will be an enemy of Celestial Wolf City and the entire kingdom of gods." Not only was the golden-armored commander's expression strange, but the reactions of the 10 silver-armored captains were also strange. Ji Tianxing could see that the golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains really did not know him. They also did not know what was going on with the 7 major sections. Seeing this, he could not help but sneer. What a great accusation. Looks like this is the meaning of your death. Since you don't know me and are only here on the orders of the city lord, then let me tell you. You have been tricked by the city lord of Celestial Wolf City. All of you have been used as cannon fodder by him. Ji Tianxing's voice spread over a radius of 100 miles, and over 1,000 people heard it clearly. Instantly, the golden-armored commander, the silver-armored captains, and 1,000 city guards all revealed complicated expressions. Most people snorted disdainfully, clearly not believing his words. They sneered contemptuously and whispered to each other. Only a few people revealed looks of surprise and doubt. They had some misgivings. However, the golden-armored commander quickly calmed down and sneered contemptuously. "Kid, don't try to mislead people with your lies and disturb the morale of my troops. The fact that you killed the innocent and massacred the common people is an ironclad fact. Don't even think about using such a clumsy trick to sow discord. I'm the commander of the city guards. It's my duty to protect the safety of the city and the citizens of Skywolf City." Several silver-armored captains spoke one after another, trying to persuade the golden-armored commander. "Lord Commander, that brat is deliberately trying to sow discord. You can't believe him. Commander, that brat is stalling for time. We can't let him succeed. Don't waste your breath on him. Let's take advantage of the fact that they are weak and haven't recovered from their injuries and encircle them now." Although Ji Tianxing, Xuelin, and the rest were all monarch god powerhouses, if it was any other day, these city guards would have to be wary. But now, Xuelin, Xuehuan, and the others were in a sorry state. They were covered in blood and injuries and looked very weak. Therefore, these city guards were not worried, nor were they afraid of the crowd. The golden-armored commander listened to the instigation of the captains and decisively waved his hand, giving the order to attack. "City guards, listen to my orders. Immediately arrest the culprit who killed the innocent and bring him back to the city lord's mansion to be dealt with. If there is any resistance, kill without mercy." As his voice fell, the 10 silver-armored captains waved their divine swords in unison and roared as they charged toward Ji Tianxing and the others. Thousands of city guards also let out deafening battle cries as they charged from all directions. In an instant, the sky within a radius of 100 miles was covered by a dazzling divine light. Sword light and sword light covered the sky, and all kinds of dazzling divine light poured down like a flood. Soon, Ji Tianxing and the others were about to be engulfed by the radiance of blades and divine spells. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing calmly ordered, "All of you, enter the divine warship and rest. Leave these city guards to me." If this had been in the past, Xuelin and the others would have been worried and stopped him when they heard this. After all, it was too dangerous for him to fight against 1,000 people alone. It was too exaggerated. However, after a few battles, everyone had witnessed Ji Tianxing's terrifying methods. Every time they would be shocked. Now, he had become an undefeatable legend in everyone's hearts. He was definitely powerful and invincible. Xuelin and the others did not hesitate and immediately entered the divine warship. In the blink of an eye, only Ji Tianxing was left in the sky. He put away the divine warship and formed a divine seal with both hands as he brazenly used a sword technique. Sword rain. As he roared, Thousands of giant swords appeared in the sky and shot down like meteors. Each giant sword was thousands of feet tall and glowed with colorful light. They contained unparalleled divine power and violent sword intent that could destroy everything. Of course, the thousands of giant swords still needed a breath's time to fall. On the other hand, the city guard's attack drowned Ji Tianxing first. At this critical moment, he did not hesitate to use the infinite sky of chaos. His body became transparent and illusory. He became one with tens of thousands of miles of heaven and earth, as if he did not exist in this world and was not affected at all. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light covered the sky and cut through the sky without any obstruction. It passed through Ji Tianxing's body and scattered on the ground. Instantly, hundreds of miles of land was blasted into ruins. The surrounding mountains collapsed, and Ji Tianxing was safe and sound. He still stood in the sky with a calm expression. Seeing this, the golden-armored commander and the 10 silver-armored captains were all stunned. They were extremely shocked. Even many of the city guards looked as if they had seen a ghost and exclaimed in disbelief. No one dared to believe that Ji Tianxing actually had such a strange method to easily resolve everyone's encirclement. At this moment, the golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains suddenly had a bad feeling. They realized that the black-haired, foreign race youth in front of them was ridiculously powerful. He was not someone they could provoke. Also, they would have to pay a heavy price, because the thousands of giant swords that covered the sky had already descended. The terrifying divine power and sword intent had already enveloped everyone. They were terrified and had a premonition that death was approaching. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, the thousands of giant swords slammed down fiercely, covering a radius of 300 miles. The earth-shattering sound immediately reverberated through the sky and spread for thousands of miles. This area immediately became chaotic. Dust filled the sky. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The ground cracked and collapsed. It was as if doomsday had arrived. The golden-armored commander and the 10 silver-armored captains took out their life-saving divine weapons at the critical moment and used their unique skills to block the attack of the thousands of swords with all their strength. They were quite lucky. The golden-armored commander was slightly injured. The silver-armored captains were severely injured. Only 4 of them were killed on the spot. As for the thousands of city guards, they were not so lucky and did not have enough strength. Under the attack of the thousands of swords, they exploded into a bloody mist and dust. They were directly killed. When the thousands of giant swords dissipated, only a few lucky city guards were still alive. 99% of them had disappeared. Seeing this scene, the golden-armored commander and the silver-armored captains felt a chill down their spines. They were in despair.